It's time. No.
Here.
All right, I see us live. Ben?
Great. I will hand it back. Oh, Tammy's here. I'm going to admit her.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so it looks like everyone from the board is here. So I will call to order this regular monthly meeting of the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees. Everyone is present. We do have a lengthy agenda tonight, so I'm going to try to move things along. You'll also notice the order of the agenda has changed slightly to accommodate some things that I think are better in order this way. Are there any other changes or additions or deletions from the agenda? I do have one addition, which I'll add to my portion of the report, which is a request from, and I'll explain it when we get there. It's a request from Anna Kellis of the county legislature for us to consider an item. Anything else to add or delete?
I actually do have a potential resolution, which again, so it'll be, I guess, under the agenda, it could be EMS charts resolution. It sort of came in pretty recently, so I'm sorry I haven't updated you, but I'll get to it. I'm not sure if we can act on it tonight or not, but probably better
Okay.
safe than sorry. Put it on there.
You want to just do that under your report?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Going once. Item number.
Maybe strike the bridge conversation. Just kidding, Alan. Just kidding. Just want to make sure everyone hears me.
Item number 3 on the agenda is approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes in the Dropbox. We had a special board meeting on September the 10th, which was actually our joint meeting with the various towns to discuss the fire and EMS contracts. And then we had our regular monthly meeting on September the 14th. And I would entertain a motion to accept both sets of minutes. And once seconded, if there's any conversation or changes, we can address those then.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, comments, or changes necessary?
Yes, there was one change. I think I made a comment. Tammy or Morgan, did you see the comment I made? Now I can't find it, but there's a section there that says that I made a motion to appoint Mark. Oh, there it is. The regular board meeting, the second from the top, that I made a motion to appoint Mark. And I don't believe that we had a motion for that because that's just Rorden's prerogative to appoint those positions.
Right, so at the top of page 2, right, we did not enact through resolution the appointment to the Street Tree Advisory Committee.
Right, or the EMC, both
Or
of
the
them.
EMC.
Or yeah.
Did you get that, Morgan?
Yep.
Any other comments, edits, changes? Going twice. All right, then all in favor of adopting both sets of meeting minutes as amended, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item number 4 on our agenda is our first public comment period, which I don't see anyone from the public other than those who are here for a reason. Although, Alan, if there's anything non-bridge related that you wanted to comment on, now would be the time.
No.
Okay. Very good. Then,
Well, actually, I could say one thing. I think your village office exterior needs attention. I'm sure you know.
anything more specific than that?
Well, that one wall on the, what would be the east wall, kind of, you could barely see it from the sidewalk, but that what was a doorway kind of falling apart. And then there was discussion about doing this, the steps at the police station, but just the exterior, the front exterior of the building, the below the porch area certainly needs some attention.
And probably include the porch area with that.
Yeah, but certainly the below the porch area and the front steps, just aesthetically, and some rot and repair, which I'm sure you probably, people have noticed, but I think it's appropriate to attend to that.
Indeed. One more check to see if anyone else has showed up, and they have not. So we will move along to item number 5, which is the reason that Alan is here, and Andy Sharaba from TG Miller joins us as well. Thank you, Andy, for giving us a few minutes. The much beloved Gregg Street footbridge that we've been discussing for some time. Alan and Andy have come up with I think, a good solution to our, at least as far as the usability of the bridge, a good solution for that. And I'll turn it over to Alan and Andy to kind of describe to the board, those who haven't been made aware of it, describe to the board kind of what they have in mind.
I'm not sure of the procedure here. Andy, you want to do it or you want me to do it?
Go ahead, Alan. You can start it and I'll chime in.
Okay. The idea would be to put a footer about 6 or 7 feet from the end of the steel heading to the south, on the south side of the bridge. All this is on the south side of the bridge. Basically a concrete footer, then puts an extension on both of the I-beams to that footer, and re-support the bridge on that footer. So no longer would the support be on that stone wall. We would still let it continue to rest on the stone wall to keep it from helping retain the stone wall, and also at the same time then change the grade on the entrance to that south side of the bridge so that the water would then go into a catchment basin that's already there, and avoid future erosion. But we would not go in the creek at all for any reason to do any work with the stone at this point in time. And we would need an engineering study on the steel, because the current span on the steel, I don't know the exact size of the steel. Steel is measured by the thickness of the web and the dimensions of the web, and it would need to be engineered to make sure that if we extended it, the span would still be adequate for the foot traffic, which I'm confident that it would be. And I don't think the entire cost of the project would be very much. I outlined it in an email a couple of weeks ago, but the cost of the concrete would not be that much. It would be a couple yards of concrete, which then we could use the excess on the truck for perhaps another project. Okay, somebody's putting that drawing up that I made there. And then the cost of the steel would be minimal. And we would probably get a professional welder. One would be Bruce Furon, who used to work for AccuFab or ran AccuFab, or we would get somebody from AccuFab, I would say, or some certified welder to make sure that the welds are certified, and then the rest we could do ourselves. Any questions?
So as Alan had sent it, sorry, Andy, as Alan had sent this to me, I don't know if you can see the cursor moving. This would be the Gregg Street retaining wall. And essentially the concept is to extend the south side of the bridge further into Gregg Street so as to not need to do any repair to the retaining wall in order to shore up the bridge. And Alan brought Andy in, and again, thanks Andy for your time, just to kind of look at the concept and see whether it might work. And I won't speak for Andy, he can tell us. He's here, so that's a good sign, but I'll let him speak to the concept. And then that doesn't in any way remove the need to address any erosion or deterioration of the retaining wall over time, but it allows us to apply a short-term reliable fix for the use of the bridge.
Yeah, that's correct. We confirmed with both the DEC and the Army Corps that the work that's shown here would not require any permits from them because everything is outside of the stream corridor. So this would allow the temporary reopening of the bridge. The drainage work that we would do in the roadway, I'd like to work with Dustin on that. We may be able to minimize the work with minimal regrading, maybe a little bit of curb and an extra structure, a little bit of pipe might do the job there. But right now that wall is experiencing some undercutting from the stream flow, kind of back cutting it, as well as runoff from the roadway. So it's kind of getting it from two sides. That's a much larger project. So this approach will alleviate at least the road drainage problems, and then get the bridge open, and then allow for time to study and plan for future replacement of the larger wall.
Now, Andy, Matt McKenna from MRB is on the call for another purpose tonight, but I did mention to him that we were moving in a direction other than messing with the retaining wall at this time. I believe, and Matt, jump in whenever, I believe that they have recently hired a new structural engineer with their firm. So if timing and circumstance make it more efficient for the two of you to talk, unless you have another structural engineer in mind, Andy, that you wanted to run this by, certainly we could do some coordination on that side.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask if MRB actually had structural engineers on staff, so I think that makes a lot of sense if they're already as the village engineer there.
Yeah, we do. We have several, and one of our junior structural engineers relocated to Houston, but still working for us. So that we backfilled that position, and Jeremy just started yesterday as a project manager with a structural background. So he'd be ready to go with whatever tasks were presented. So glad to assist.
And I could, if you wanted, if the person you say is in Houston?
No, we actually have in our Rochester office.
Okay, because I could do the measurements on the steel and the length, the current length of the steel, and it's really just, I think, just a calculation of what that span is and for that particular steel.
Yeah, and we actually, Jeremy was able to develop a list of questions. I thought I was making my way down to Trumansburg tonight, so I was going to do some field recon, but we can share those, and that would definitely assist if that field work could get verified for us for the analysis.
Yeah, and I'm not sure of the timing of all this, but obviously we've had quite the drought this year. We've had, thankfully, some rain lately, which we've sort of needed, but if the intent was to jack the existing bridge up enough to clear it for the welding work and temporary supports, I leave this up to your structural engineer, Matt, but it may be worth considering doing that now with the creek as low as it is. And you're going to jack from the creek bed versus having to get some sort of a crane or large equipment in there to lift it.
Right.
We might not have the time to do that, but it's just a thought.
So for the board, the reason I wanted Alan and Andy to kind of present this is so that you could hear directly from them what they have in mind. We obviously don't know for sure what kind of cost we're looking at, but it should be much less than some of the large, scary numbers we've heard with respect to the retaining wall repair. But I wanted to get a sense from the board of desire to move forward, give both Andy and Matt the go ahead to let their conversations continue, and before we start jacking up the bridge or doing any of that, we'll need some type of a cost estimate of what we're getting ourselves into. But at least in concept, seeing what the feeling of the board was as far as moving forward with this.
I'm happy with anything that gets it done. My one question is, was there an assessment done as far as its stability now? I think I had mentioned at our last meeting that it looks okay. I think you could open.
Yeah, we did look at that, and I'll let Andy kind of talk to that.
From my first look at it, Ben, I can't say it's going to fall down tomorrow. It looks unstable to me. Again, I'm not a structural engineer, but from the rocks directly underneath the roadside of the bridge there, I don't think it's a very stable structure right now. And without a further evaluation of that wall, I think it's best that it is temporarily closed as you have it. But I think this is a nice solution to try to get it reopened, so you don't have to do the entire wall project right away.
And I'd like to chime in that, we both looked at that together. I 100% agree. I can't imagine any engineer would allow it to be opened again. It's eroded more since the last time we looked at it a year ago or whatever.
Yeah, Ben, and there's the support on the bridge, but then if you go upstream just a little bit, the embankment immediately upstream for about 35, 40 feet is really starting to kind of back cut. So hopefully it'll stay.
Well, for what I'm certainly on board with moving forward in whatever way feels the fastest to reopening it. I think that's great. So thanks for putting it together.
I got a question. What do you think the chances are that bridge is actually holding some of that retaining wall back?
It probably is. It likely is, and that's why that's some of that stone is still there. So we would put it back on that stone that's there, and once it's connected further up, there's no way that the bridge could fall then, because it would be supported further up the road, but yet it would still serve a purpose, ideally, of holding some of those top stones in place, and we could potentially even add a little anchor through them a little bit, but it is eroding.
Yeah.
And a big rainstorm at some point, who knows what would happen.
Right.
Yeah, I think we want to evaluate that with the structural engineer. What we don't want to have happen is by temporarily holding that wall, if it does give way, then it puts stress on the bridge. So I think we want to consider whether it makes sense to put it back on the stone at all, or get it free, support it, let it span, and then we have to just kind of deal with the wall as a separate entity. But I'll kind of defer to MRB structural folks for that.
And to be clear, the new wall, the concrete footer that you're proposing is in village property and wouldn't require any sort of easement for the land.
Yeah, it'd be in the roadway. Jessica.
Okay, and certainly then it would make sense to make sure this happens before spring, right? We're talking about floodwaters and.
If everything lines up, and the funding, and we can go forward, sure. We are against the paving time clock. Usually the asphalt plants close close to Thanksgiving. So
Okay.
So we're pushing it a little bit. But maybe the bridge can happen, and I'm not sure if the road drainage has to wait till spring, but like, as Gordon said, if we go forward here, we can then start putting some numbers to this, understand the process and the dollars and the timing. That would be kind of a summary, maybe the next meeting.
So is that the next step, Gordon, to sort of assess what the price of this actually means and where that money comes from?
Yeah, I mean, the next step is to get the eyes of a structural engineer on the project, get some idea of what their interpretation of the scope of work would be, which would then lead to how much it's going to cost the village.
If we do it ourselves, I can't imagine the actual material cost being any more than probably somewhere around $3,000. We would be able to definitely do that job as we're describing it. That wouldn't, there's some variables as to what the surface on top of the steel would be, whether we would put wood on top of the steel or we would have a concrete sort of sidewalk on top of the steel. The structural engineer would advise us on what they thought would be the best way to approach what is the existing walkway. And so there's a little cost there, but I think $3,000 probably, it wouldn't cost much if we do it ourselves.
And I think we should clarify, Alan, that's the bridge cost. That's not including any drainage upgrades to the roadway.
Right.
Or professional fees.
No, right.
So Gordon, what do you need this board to say about this?
Just that
Or
there
what-
are no objections at this point in concept, and allow me to give Matt the go-ahead to work with Andy on getting their MRB structural engineer to put together a game plan for us.
I'm wholeheartedly for exploring this and think that many villagers are also eager to have that walking path back.
I'll chime in and just say the same. Very much appreciate the kind of ingenuity and thinking outside the box here. I know that we've been struggling with this for quite a while and hasn't quite found the right solution. This feels like it might be it. So excited to pursue it and see where it goes.
It was all Alan's idea, so I can't take any credit. He threw that out there. It was a great suggestion as we were looking at the wall. So
That's why he's never allowed to move away year round, right, Alan? You have to stay. Yeah.
I'm ancient though.
Well, good. Then thanks again, Andy and Alan. Matt will let you and Andy coordinate with your new structural engineer. Try to keep this, at least the bridge portion of this. I don't like to use the word Band-Aid, but at least keep the bridge portion of this as the front and center focus. Drainage being priority number 2, retaining wall being priority number 3. We know we're not going to get to that. But even if, I think in my mind, even if drainage is not fully addressed, but the bridge portion can be, so that we can get that reopened, then that'll be a win. And then at least we know we've got 2 more items to take care of. And then hopefully we won't wait too long to get to it.
But on that street drainage will make a significant difference, I believe, in the future erosion, and perhaps it could be left alone for a very extended period of time. Perhaps we'll go right.
Good. Okay, well, thanks again, Andy and Alan, for all of that work. We'll move along, since we are talking with Matt. We'll move right along to item number 6, which is conversation about proposed stormwater upgrades. He wants to kind of go over I have to take a sideways step because we haven't discussed it very fully. The village has been awarded a grant through Assemblywoman Lifton's office. The grant is administered by DASNY, the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, in the amount of $125,000 to address certain drainage deficiencies in certain particular areas of the village. We know we have drainage issue hotspots throughout the village. This will not take care of all of them by any means, given the dollar amount. But in order to try to prioritize some of them, we looked at the areas, we narrowed our focus because of the way the grant is being administered. We narrowed our focus to those areas where all of the drainage improvements can be accomplished entirely in the village right of way. Did not involve any type of digging on private property, would not, in all likelihood, I don't believe we've determined, or I believe we've determined that it would not require any easements. And so that the areas where that focus falls is the area of Seneca Road from Prospect Street down to essentially down to King, as well as focusing on drainage issues on Seneca Street in between, is it Bradley and Congress? And that will require some work to be done on Congress in order to free up improvement capability for Seneca Street. And so I'm going to try to share a screen here of a drawing and then just let Matt talk about the scope. Now, one item, which I'm actually scooping something from item 8, one item that we've been working with DASNY very closely. They've been very helpful, getting them the information they need to essentially review and approve the project. We've given them everything they need, and they are in the project review phase with all expectations that they will approve what we've submitted. However, effective sometime in April, Governor Cuomo froze all spending for all projects, even those awarded through the legislature. So we'll be in a holding pattern as far as the spending goes. But we want to at least have it ready to go and approved on our end from an engineering perspective, so that once the money is freed up, we can get going. And so Matt, take it away while I find this drawing for you.
Yeah, so that was a good segue, Roden. Appreciate it. We got a call and notification that the village had received the grant dollars. Prior to that, MRB's assisted the village with just kind of doing a stormwater infrastructure tabulation, so to speak. Findings report was put together, identifying some areas, as well as just locating infrastructure related to stormwater throughout the village, because it was really just record drawings that were available at that time. So this is kind of that next step. One area that was identified in that findings report was along East Seneca Road, where there was existing infrastructure in place, assumed to be undersized given the flooding and pooling that's been seen there. So there's after the call, MRB went out and met with DPW and looked at a couple areas. It was East Seneca Road, Congress Street, and East Seneca Street. So along East Seneca Road, it's an area that was identified in that findings report. We show out an existing head wall and stormwater culvert. In theory here, a lot of stormwater from the northern portion of the village, right? Everything kind of flows west to east and then north to East Seneca Road. So this pipe has essentially become a bottleneck, and with our proposal, would evaluate the amount of flow coming to this pipe and size it appropriately for high intensity, short duration storms, so that ponding, pooling, and flooding in that area is mitigated and conveyed to the downstream swale, which heads to the east along King Street. So that's one portion of the proposal for the design work. MRB would come out and do the topographic survey, locate any utilities, coordinate with the DPW. One thing that we did catch during the conceptual phase is there is water main right along that same southern side of East Seneca Road. Typically, water main's about 5 feet below grade to protect against freezing. So we anticipate that there would be a conflict. I think we have a solution to work around that with cutting into the water main, bending, allowing our stormwater pipe to get to the elevation we need, so that can flow by gravity. So some work associated with reconfiguring the water main in that area has been included in our preliminary estimate. So we feel comfortable that that's been accounted for and can be addressed. So the next section of the village that we were taken to was the Congress East Seneca Street area to the east of Washington Street. Correct me if I'm around there, Rorden. And it's generally a flat area of the village, and flat topography really doesn't bode well for stormwater infrastructure, right? We always want to have our stormwater flow by gravity. So one thing to bring or to mention here is we looked at a couple options. An option for Seneca Street, incorporating some catch basins to catch any surface flow or sheet flow, and then some piping to convey that flow to the east where Congress Street slopes to the north of East Seneca Road. You can see here as well that on Congress Street, we show stormwater pipe as well as catch basins to again catch that sheet flow. No real stormwater infrastructure in place that could be found. So we provided an estimate, sat down with the mayor, Rorden, and Dustin, and went through our options. And looking at East Seneca Road, that's been a priority, as well as including Congress Street and East Seneca Street. Looked like we were going to exceed the grant value that's been provided to the village. So that tailored us back to looking at putting the infrastructure in place along Congress Street, so that in the future project of incorporating stormwater infrastructure on Seneca Street could ultimately drain out to Congress Street. So it's, you kind of can't really get anywhere with the East Seneca Street portion without having Congress Street in place first. And again, included in MRB's scope here would be topographic survey, locating any utilities, using that mapping to develop our design drawings, coordinate water, sewer, gas services, and so on and so forth.
Matt, could you describe what the optics are for a catch basin?
Say that again.
Could you describe what a catch basin looks like?
It's just a grate that you'd see walking along the side of the road, concrete structure below grade. So any surface flow would flow into that grate, where you then have stormwater pipe that would come in or come out. And it's just generally a location where you bring multiple pipes together.
And so do they come in various widths, or are they, we see some of those on Lake Street, right down by the bridge.
Right.
There, which seem quite large. Are they always a standard size, or would Congress Street be different?
So Lake Street, I think you're referencing like that metal bar rack, that big concrete vault. So these would sit flush within the roadway. So you wouldn't have that big vault.
They're the other side of the sidewalk. They're in the roadway.
The other side of the sidewalk. Yeah. So I would say those would be oversized. It could be a 3 foot by 3 foot concrete. There's also plastic pipe that act as catch basin. So there's different, there's different sizes, okay. There's different material. Some have, they fit their application. So,
obviously, form is more important, function is more important than form in this case, but it's something.
And making sure it would be durable.
But both are important. Yeah, great. Yeah. Thank you.
And so for the board, in the Dropbox, you have item number 6, titled Letter Proposal, Stormwater Improvements. Basically outlines what Matt has described, as well as costs associated with it. We ended up with a bottom line number. Let's see, where is it? For the engineering work of, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, $20,700. What it does to the DASNY grant is it puts us over the $125,000 number by about, remind me, Matt, was it 9,000? a little bit more,
Yeah.
130.
I have this
Total project number came out to 130 something,
134. So yeah, 9,000.
about 9,000. And so DASNY did require that we submit proof of funds that we could cover the 9,000. Fortunately, we were able to show that from our general account. But for tonight, I think what we are looking for is simply a resolution to accept MRB's proposal for this scope of work for their services, some of which won't begin or be able to begin until DASNY gives us the green light anyway. The DASNY grant itself is a reimbursement grant. So we're protected in the sense that there isn't a whole lot of this work or scope of work for MRB to even do until we really begin, which we won't begin until DASNY says go ahead, at which time they'll be able to begin reimbursing us. There may be some in that $9,000 overage, if we want to think of it that way, some initial work that we would be paying MRB for prior to any type of DASNY green light, but it certainly would be in that amount that we are on the hook for anyway for the total scope of project. But I wanted to have Matt at least present it, see if there were any other board questions, and then if not, and if everyone's in favor, then we can at least approve this portion of the proposal.
I mean, I guess it might be great, and I presume there's always somebody watching. And I apologize that I haven't read this entire proposal, so you may have very well answered that, Matt. That this accounts for not only mitigating what's currently happening, but allows for increased storm experiences, increased requirements.
Sure, it would
The
be,
100-year storm.
yeah, we'd look at current precipitation events and size it for, short duration, high intensity flows, rain events, precipitation, melt off, that we're seeing that this infrastructure designed back in the 60s wasn't, didn't quite accommodate for that. So certainly.
So taking into the unknown of the modern era.
Trying to
Great.
add, just some additional capacity. Yes,
Good.
that's
It's on
That's
everyone's
my
mind, so I'm glad we mentioned it.
And along those lines, it's a good point, Jessica. Along those lines, there are two or three other areas in the village that are significant contributors to drainage issues, I&I issues, inflow and infiltration issues at our sewer plant, significant standing water and runoff onto private property. So there are two or three other, what I'll call major hotspots in the village, but they all, to one extent or another, all involve work being required on private property. And so we'll have to come around some other type of solution or some other type of grant funding or some other type of long-term financing that isn't precluded by the fact that we have to do a significant amount of work on private property, unless we can get the property owner to take on some of that work.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that answers the why this spot and not these spots. That's great.
Any other board comment or questions for Matt?
Is there any estimated timeline on the grant?
The email from the DASNY lead did not give us any hope of a timeline.
Of course not. Okay.
And Rory and I can just, take that back to the office and, if DASNY's, dragging their feet or is, slow to respond, I don't foresee MRB having any hesitation to get out and get the work, specifically the survey, done early this year, like get it done this before the snow flies, which could potentially allow us to have our design plans in place. So once you add the green light, you'd be ready to put it out on the streets and maximize your timing. So I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah, no, that's great. The email from DASNY, I mean, they've been very helpful, and they did reference this specific executive order that froze everything. So we're still in the as long as we're under a state of emergency, then everything is up in the air and held there phase of this. So my best guess would be that probably doesn't change until the new year or the spring at the earliest, but at least if we can have, as Matt said, if we can have our portion of the pre-work done, which includes bidding the project and so forth, then we won't be holding things up once the money is available.
Keith, I'm sure you're familiar with this ugly question, but is there any reason, Matt or Gordon, to suspect that the state will rescind these funds as a result of COVID, that this money could dry up? With any indication that that could be the case?
Well, that's a pretty loaded question. So this particular funding is allocated by the legislature to its members. So it's not supposed to have any departmental or executive oversight to its spend. However, because we're in a state of emergency, the governor has wide powers to do things that he doesn't actually have the power to do, such as freeze spending on money that he doesn't have oversight over. There was actually, not to get out in the weeds on this, there was some federal funding that came through with the CARES Act that was allocated for municipalities, but it was supposed to be dispersed through the states, and the governor has sat on it and refused to disperse it. So could the money dry up under those types of circumstances? Absolutely. Can it be unallocated from a legislative sense? No. So we wait and see what happens once the state of emergency is lifted at some point.
And so that's why, in part, that notion then, Matt, of doing the survey is something we would need done anyway, and is not a huge expense necessarily, Gordon, and then we can move forward once funds became available. Is that what the proposal is?
Yeah, and I think that this scope of work, particularly what I'll call the pre-work, which includes some of the bid work, in that worst case scenario where DASNY comes back and says, hey, the governor took all of our funds to cover a shortfall somewhere else, and you all are out of luck. At least we would have the work done to begin hopefully shopping for another grant from some other agency or some other funding arm to do the work. Ben, any thoughts?
Yeah, is there a downside to holding off until we're more sure of the funding and the timeline?
I could barely hear that question, Ben. I think you asked about a downside to what?
Is there a downside to holding off and we're more sure of the funding and the timing, and we can get our ducks more in a row?
I think the primary downside is that this scope of work would need to be done no matter what, at least to address the drainage issues in those sections. If money were no object and we decided we wanted to take on one of the other hotspots in the village first, then the downside would be that we've done some work we're not actually going to use. I don't know that there's a significant upside in holding off, since we would want to try to move relatively quick. I mean, let's say, and I'm admittedly being Pollyannish about this, but let's say the state of emergency was lifted around Thanksgiving, because for whatever reason, let your imaginations run wild as to why the state of emergency might get lifted. But if the state of emergency did get lifted early and we could do this work this winter before a spring thaw, then that would be something that we would want to push the timeline on that.
I'm just imagining a scenario. I mean, to my mind, the primary complaints were up higher on East Seneca. The ones that I remember were closer to Washington. I'm trying to remember exactly what properties they were. But, if I got to prioritize this on my own outside of the DASNY issue, I'm not sure that I would prioritize it this way. So if we don't get that funding and we've already set up this work, then we're locked into this set of priorities regardless, even if the DASNY constraint goes away, is my only concern. I mean, otherwise I would say certainly go for it, but I hesitate a little bit just because of that.
And Matt, feel free to jump in. A lot of those drainage complaints from further up Washington towards Bradley, a lot of those backyard issues and drainage issues would also require private property work. And the flow downhill towards Prospect bottlenecks at Prospect, which leads to some of the other issues that would likely, fingers crossed, likely be dramatically improved by the proposed work on Prospect and Seneca headed towards King. Basically, if you open up that bottleneck significantly, then a lot of the upstream issues, that water now has somewhere to go.
I would definitely agree, Rord, in that, when we looked at the different areas identified, East Seneca Road was, top of the list for priority. I would, and Prospect Street over in that area. So I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm in favor of this moving forward as it is.
Me too.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so then I would entertain a motion to accept the proposal from MRB for professional services associated with stormwater infrastructure improvements associated with the DASNY grant funding. The SAM grant award is the technical term, for a dollar amount not to exceed $20,700.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any additional discussion?
Remind me where the funding is coming from. Sorry, I mean, from our side, where is that money coming from for now, kind of thing?
There is and Tammy, what was that budget line I gave you? There is a stormwater line
Okay.
with $25,000 in it. And so ideally we would only be spending 9 and change from that line if everything else was covered by the grant.
Great.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, then hearing none, all in favor of accepting this proposal as presented, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great, thanks, Matt. Glad you didn't drive to Trumansburg and find out we were virtual tonight.
I'm glad I called you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, you guys all know, everyone knows how to reach us, and feel free to do so.
Thanks, Matt. Item number 7 on the agenda is reports from other representatives. I know that the Ulysses Town Board also has a meeting tonight, so they will not be here. I don't see Ann Corman as present. If she joins later, we will certainly circle back and see if she has anything to update us on from the county. Item number 8 is board reports. I did move this around, so I'll lead off. Couple of items is we had an election at an odd time of year for a village. We had an election last month. Welcome. This is not your first meeting, but welcome, Trustee Giles.
You can say
to
it for
the
like
board.
a year. It's a honeymoon year.
I think you'll get them. I think you'll get a month and a half.
No jokes during board reporting. Sorry.
And welcome back, Keith, for another term. With Jessica's election to this board, she was required by law to resign her position on the planning board. I have appointed Rick Geiger as the chair of the planning board. He's graciously agreed to step back into that role after a couple of years off. But that does leave a vacancy to be filled on the planning board for the remainder of the term that Jessica was serving. I have had conversations with a couple of people and not surprisingly have not received a lot of interest in the planning board seat, but had a couple of people I've talked to seem really great. And so I am officially, as of tonight, appointing Mark Devakaitis to the vacant position of planning board member. Mark is serving out the last portion or the last couple of months of his term as a Ulysses Town Board member, at which time he will be no longer on that board and is interested to continue being involved in the community. So I appointed him to the Street Tree Advisory Committee last month, and he's very interested in many things planning. So he will be taking his seat on the planning board effective immediately. I have also had a fantastic conversation with a newer village resident who is a professional planner by trade, has a very interesting planning background. He grew up in Ithaca, moved and worked in a large suburb of Colorado for 10 years, population of about 160,000. He worked there as a planner on their residential development approval committee. Interesting line of work in a large bustling area. And now he's since moved back and he's employed as the senior planner in Cayuga County. So he's moved from bustling suburban development to rural planning, and he likes that experience on both ends of that spectrum. He has enjoyed and I think will be very useful to the village. His name is Greg Colucci, and I am appointing him for the term of 1 year as a planning board alternate, effective immediately. And Greg will, in my conversation with him, he expressed an interest in being able to assist the village with professional planner type questions and planning goals. And one of the things that I think this board, and we don't have to discuss it tonight, but we should be thinking about in the near term, I would say over the next few months, is whether we want to delegate or designate to the planning board any additional projects, mandates, scopes of work that they can be doing. I know that in past years, other planning boards have expressed a desire to study various things and provide recommendation to the village board on what they felt we as a village should be looking to do. None of those intentions or efforts ended up panning out into a project or work of any type. But I think that the concept is valid, particularly coming out of what will be a revised comprehensive plan at some point here in the near future, revised zoning following on that. I think it would be nice to have some of that work done in terms of continuing the good work of the CPZR and keeping an eye towards how we want things to move for the village. So we can start thinking as a board, it'll be on the village board to mandate the planning board with some of that work if we so choose. So I think we can start to give that some thought. Next item under my report is with some of the changes, primarily the primary change being Deb Watkins retiring from public service, much to her joy. We have some shifting around on the village board to make official. We have Ben Darfler stepping into the role of DPW Water and Sewer Commissioner. We have, I have named Ben Carver as our Deputy Mayor, and Jessica will be taking over the role of Fire Commissioner. Keith will stay with Police, and Ben will stay with EMS. We also, over the last few weeks, Scott Sheevely of the Zoning Board of Appeals has announced that he would like to no longer participate in the CPZR, where he's been very helpful and has done good work on that committee. But time constraints and whatnot, he's starting to scale back. And so we are in need of a ZBA member on the CPZR, a lot of initials in that sentence. And so I am appointing Noah Demarest from the ZBA as the ZBA liaison or member to the Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Revision Committee. I already mentioned our various commissioner shifts. Any questions on any of that so far, particularly on the planning board piece?
Not really a question, but I'll just kind of double click on that conversation. God, I hate that that term. Sorry. I'll just want to reiterate what you're saying about the planning board. I think as we've gone through with the CPZR process, there's a lot there that I think we would rely on the planning board once that committee's kind of reached its goal and mission. I can think of things around, design guidelines for Main Street is something that's come up quite a bit, which would be interesting to get feedback from the planning board for them to kind of run that process of collecting feedback and collating it and bringing it to this board. So I think there's a bunch of interesting ideas there that we can start thinking about.
And to echo that sentiment, Ben, I'd say unless the board just started being totally different than when I was there a month ago, I think they would love the notion of some village board driven projects for them to investigate. I think that they're over maybe the long distance run that was the last application, and it sort of fired up some interest in doing more things. So I think that that's great. There's great ground there to build on.
Double click on that idea. That's the first time I've heard that phrase.
Don't keep saying it. It's not good.
And I already don't like it. So
I'm gonna go ahead and throw a smiley emoji on the play. And
next item under my report is we have some tentative dates for the initial public meetings for our police reform collaborative and discussion. We had, I believe, I don't have the list right in front of me, 17 individuals who emailed and expressed their desire to participate. We advertised the desire to seek that type of individual public input as widely as we know how. Website, village Facebook page, my mayor's Facebook page. I would guess, based on, you'd have to ask Ben how reliable some of these view metrics are from some of these websites, but I would guess that anywhere from 3,500 to 4,000 people saw those notifications. We received 17, as I said, interested individuals. We scheduled 2 meeting dates, one in person and one virtual. Interestingly enough, and I think fortunately enough, the breakdown of folks who opted for one versus the other is just about 50-50. So we should have a nice mix of about the target group size of 8 to 10 people. The in-person meeting will be next Thursday, the 22nd. It'll be at the fire hall. Tammy, I need to make sure that is available. And if there's anyone that has reserved it for the 22nd, we're probably going to Bigfoot them out. Not sure if Tammy heard all of that. The virtual meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, November the 10th. And we will run that via Zoom. The format of those 2 meetings, and these are just the first 2 of what I expect will be several types of meetings. Based on the governor's executive order, we need community input from individuals, individual community members, community agencies, including churches and not-for-profits, and then, of course, input from law enforcement and the DA's office and other elected officials. So my planned time frame is individual members of the community first, which is what these 2 meetings are. Probably 1 meeting, if we can arrange it, in the winter months-ish, with not-for-profits, churches, members of the community, if they want to participate. And then probably a meeting with an easier to pull together, probably short notice meeting with the DA's office and the sheriff's department, as they themselves, as the county works through their similar process. We may, in fact, if the county is doing some group meetings, we may just consider our meeting with them, our collaboration with them, as fulfilling that piece of ours. All with the end mandate of creating a, it feels like a college term paper, creating some type of a work product that states what this village police department needs to do to operate more efficiently and with removal of any type of discrimination or improper practices going forward, and submitting that to New York State by April 1st. The question I have for the board is, are any of the other board members, so the both meetings, the in-person and the virtual, I will be attending, Keith will be attending, and Chief Nelson will be attending. Are any of the other board members interested in attending, which is fine, but if so, they will become meetings for which we will have to notice.
So I would actually be interested in seeing recordings of those meetings, and maybe participating in this forum after seeing that input. I think that's probably an easier way to do it rather than notice the meeting and go through all of that. So I assume they'll be recorded. Is that right?
Well, the intention had been for them to be small group, non-public meetings with, kind of committee style meetings with these volunteers. Certainly the virtual one, if you all are welcome to attend. So if you attend, it becomes a board meeting, and then of course we'll record it. So it really is just first things first. If there was no interest in any other board member in attending, then that would be a different conversation for us to have.
Well, I would certainly like to attend. I don't know what my schedule is on the 10th. I don't think I can make the 22nd. So that would be the option. But I can't really commit to it without looking into it a little bit.
I'd like to join on the 10th, the Zoom call. I'll actually be at the planning board meeting chatting with them about our previous conversation on the 22nd. So I won't be able to make that one. If it does become a board meeting in public and we want to record it, I'm happy to lend my camera to the fray, and I'm sure Keith can figure out how to turn it on.
So I'm super torn. Well, I'm super torn because I think the notion of being able to have an actual conversation where people feel like they aren't in public and they're not recorded has serious value. And so then if our presence makes that now not just a safe space that's not open to larger public scrutiny, I think that could be detrimental. However, completely fascinated, intrigued, and want to be there. So I don't know where to go with that.
Yeah, I was kind of feeling that too. If they become public and we record them and everything, does that in any way stymie the conversation? I don't know, maybe not. I imagine, the people that signed up are pretty.
I don't know if we have a sense of the structure of the meeting yet, but I know I feel like in some previous conversation, there was the idea of kind of a opening presentation from Chief around what does our department look like? How does it work currently? I think at the very least, that amount of recording that amount would be particularly interesting. I think a lot of people, I know I've talked to other folks who don't feel a particular need to share their voice in the conversation, but are just interested in generally understanding better how our police force operates. So at the very least, if we could consider that part of it as recorded, yeah.
And let's flip it too. Like, if it weren't COVID, would everyone be welcome to a fire hall meeting? I mean, if it weren't COVID, would it be unlimited?
So thanks for reminding me, Ben. We do actually have a format that Keith and Chief and I have discussed. We don't have all of the content yet, but we would basically start off with a very kind of brief history of the department, when it formed, kind of things that most of part-time officers for the whole time until recently, kind of what the needs have been, an idea of what our hours of coverage have been, not specific to day and time, but the fact that we're not a 24/7 agency. We would also then discuss some of the agency coordination with other law enforcement agencies, how they cover when we're not available, what our call volume numbers are, just an idea of what the types of calls we deal with. And then the last kind of presentation piece would be, chief discussing, his approach to law enforcement, his approach to policing, maybe a little bit if he feels like it about, why he got into law enforcement. And then from there, really open it up to a town hall style Q&A, which is why I wanted to keep the group small. So the answer to your question, Jessica, is if it weren't for open meetings law, and if it weren't for the fact that, and I'm going to sound like I'm banging on the guy a lot today, but it comes naturally to me. If it weren't for the fact that the governor's executive order doesn't really take into account some of these logistics of how do you have these conversations in an environment of open meetings law and municipal responsibility for that, the ideal would be small private groups. It would be 6 to 10. I don't know that it lends itself to coffee with the chief type of approach. Probably if we had 2 years to do it instead of 8 or 9 months. But that small group interaction where there can be a component of education and then a lot of Q&A, where not only would the residents feel safe asking questions that they might not want to ask on camera, but frankly, the mayor, police commissioner, and police chief might feel safer answering questions in a manner that we might not feel like answering on camera. That would be the ideal. But we may not be able to effect that. There's also going to be, I expect, a state of the village version of this presentation, which would obviously have a lot more opportunity for public comment. But I'm satisfied that we are meeting the mandate that the governor has set forth by doing it this way. And really the only question is, if board members want to attend, I don't know that the open meetings law should prevent you from attending because you're residents. And if you have interest or comments and concerns, then you of course have the forum of being a trustee and at a board meeting, so you can comment then. But I don't have any issue with you also wanting to participate and comment in this different setting.
So I actually really appreciate this conversation. I feel like I've changed my mind. I would rather hang back if we feel comfortable with recording those kind of that intro, history of the park department and kind of where we are coming up to today. Cause I think that's the part I'm most interested in hearing just myself. I mean, I think I probably know a good chunk of it, but I think there's probably bits I would still learn. And I think that's what I'd be most interested in sharing with the community. And I think you're right. I think that I'd like to preserve that smaller conversation kind of in a private space, in a safer space, for people to feel like they can openly speak their mind.
I actually agree with that. I was going to say almost exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I'm there too. And I'm wondering though, if there's a way that, and maybe this is part of the plan. So there's meeting the mandate, but then there's like, this is an actual opportunity, right? To interface with the community. So is there a way to get like a high level summary of some of the key points that are brought up from those conversations so that we can benefit from that information, preserving anonymity, and or will there be an opportunity for more people to take part in a conversation, even if that is outside of the mandated requirement?
Would it be
Sure.
odd to record things, but just say it's for board review?
That would make me feel so squirmy. Like I would be like, ugh, I wouldn't like that.
Well, just
I mean, as a person.
people don't feel comfortable with public dissemination, but might feel comfortable with their elected officials reviewing it so they can help with policy. I don't know. I'm throwing it out there.
I think my preference is to have either Morgan or Tammy there taking notes on the questions as asked, not on who asked them, but particularly on the Q&A portion. If we can, because part of the governor's mandate is to take the community feedback in order to formulate this plan that is then going to require a public, I think he's requiring a public hearing, which is interesting, and then board adoption. So
Great.
so having that, what were the questions, what are the answers to those questions? Where do they lead? It is part of the kind of the research project portion of this.
Great, sold. I will not attend either meeting. Thank you for the opportunity.
I did make a note to myself to drop off the camera with Keith that morning, though. So we can record the beginning and just say, and now we'll turn it off and go from there.
Okay, good. So then, Tammy, we don't need to notice the 22nd or November 10th, but I will need either you or Morgan at the fire hall on the 22nd at 7, just to take notes. And then as well, available via Zoom on November the 10th.
Okay.
Let you guys flip a coin as to who gets which.
One of us has the planning board.
Okay. I believe I saw Ann Corman enter the room. She's in the list.
Yes, I'm here.
There's Ann. So we had passed through the report from representatives, and we'll go back there now if you have anything you would like to share with us.
Thank you. I was late coming in because of budget meetings. Let's see. I'll start with budgeting stuff. So we're still looking at a total of 48 people or positions, full-time equivalents that we've reduced our workforce by at the county. We have over 700 employees in general, and on average, I guess. And so almost all of them have been through early retirement or reallocating their position. And so I think maybe there was one actual layoff. So we tried to do the best we could, because we know, especially now, people are going to have a hard time finding jobs. And our levy that we're looking at right now is increase 1.17% and an increase of $5 for the solid waste fee. That would raise it up from $60 to $65 a year for a single family household. And the August sales tax is in, and that was for the county. It was only down 12.76% from last year. And year over year, that was down 14.76%. So we're going up in how much we're down. And let me see if I can turn this document sideways or make it be up and down. For municipalities, August was down 3.66%, and year to year 14.98%. So if things keep going the way they are, it won't be as big of a hit as it could have been. The very important protocols came out on our health department website for Halloween. So if people haven't had a chance to look at that, or if you want to share that as reference for people in the community, if you get any questions about that, there's a whole protocol that our health department has written up. Let's see, for speaking of the health department, as probably everybody knows, we unfortunately had one person pass away due to COVID who was in the hospital, and that person was 95 years old. From what I'm gathering, that person was not in one of the nursing homes. But I heard that, but I don't think I saw that in writing. But also I saw today Kendall has one case of a resident that has tested positive, plus 3 staff members. So they're closing up Kendall again for, I believe, 28 days at least. We have and overall, the numbers are starting to go up again for the county for active COVID cases. Right now, we have 42 active cases and 3 people in the hospital. So that is pretty scary. So we're just, of course, reminding people if some people are getting lax, just please remind other people that you see to please wear masks, stay 6 feet away, etc. Getting into the safety of our animals, we have the last drive-through rabies clinic for dogs and cats and ferrets. That's Saturday, October 24th at the TCAT Bus Garage on Willow Avenue, and you can go to our health department to register or go online to our health department or give them a call. Our unemployment, last we heard for the county, is 10%, and we're still getting about 150 new claims a week. So things are not too great in that area. We thought we were going to have a COVID saliva test available, but it looks like, because that's coming from New York State, right now they're allocating that to some health departments, but mostly in the areas that are having a greater uptick than we are having. Oh, and one more thing, as far as COVID, as people may be aware of too, there is a much greater uptick in COVID in some of the surrounding counties. We don't know, if that's why our numbers are also going up, because people go back and forth. So that's of concern too. But luckily, even the counties that we're grouped with, as you might have heard, the governor is, if he does impose any more shutdowns or ratcheting back of the protocols, that he would do it by zip code, not by huge geographical area like the southern tier that we're part of. And I'm seeing if there's anything else. I think that's about it. Oh, one last thing is we have an over target request in our budget for $80,000 for a broadband study, and I know Rorden, I know you had heard about that. Have you guys already discussed that?
No, it's on my list for about 5 minutes from now.
Okay. So if there's any more information, I just got off the phone with Anna Kellis about it, so I could be prepared. So if there's any questions you have on there, definitely we would like at least, verbal support. We're also looking for any type of financial support for that. Danby and Town of Caroline have each chipped in, said they're going to put into their budgets $5,000 to help with that. And then I think that's it.
Okay. Any questions for Ann?
One more thing I saw, I'm sorry, I got all these notes in front of me. I spoke with you guys before about the possible change of the traffic pattern downtown on Buffalo and Court Street. And I was looking into where should you guys send information or send your comments to, but that has been ratcheted back at the city. So it looks like that's not on the table right now. So that's good. And if I hear anything about that coming back onto the table, I will let you know.
Okay. Any comments or questions for Ann from the board? Okay, we'll jump back down to item number 8A4. I guess we already talked about DASNY, so we can skip right past DASNY and go straight to Health Consortium. So I hope everyone had a chance to look at the fairly large volume of information under item 8A5 in the Dropbox. The Health Consortium is required by statute every 5 years to review and revise as needed its municipal cooperative agreement. That's the MCA. However, over time, the Department of Financial Services, what used to be the Insurance Superintendent's Office, has begun to require the consortium to modify or reapprove its MCA every time new members join, which is problematic because we get anywhere from 8 to 12 new members a year. So the compromise we've reached is that in any year where where new members join, the member municipalities will have to re-ratify the MCA for that year at the end of the year. However, we're also in a 5-year review process period for the overall MCA. There are some changes being made to the consortium from a management perspective, because we started with 13 municipalities and now are up to 50 and counting. It's too unwieldy to try to hold board of directors meetings with every member municipality present. During COVID, it's been a little bit easier because we can do it via Zoom, but once the executive orders on remote meetings are lifted, it's just becoming problematic to manage from that perspective. So the 2021 MCA is going to be delegating most of the authorities of the health consortium to an executive committee currently slated to contain 11 members, but it could grow to as large as 17. We'll have a combination of municipal representatives and representatives from the various labor bargaining units. And that way the full consortium board of directors will only need to meet annually, probably twice a year, but at least annually, to pass a budget. So those are the primary changes. We are being asked as a member municipality to re-ratify the 2020 MCA, which includes all of the members that joined this year, and also ratify the 2021 MCA with all of the more substantial changes included. So I'm happy to field any questions if anyone. There are few things in the world quite as dry as health insurance, but if there's anything that anyone from the board has questions on, I'm certainly happy to answer them.
My only concern would be an eventuality where we get shut out to one extent or another of management. I was just noticing that it's weighted based on the size of the municipality you're voting. Am I understanding that right? And is there a world, I mean, obviously you're the vice chair, right? But if you were not there and no longer serving in that role, is our influence within the organization diminished by this in any way?
So it's, currently the way it's structured, the full board of directors meets annually and there's no weight to that voting. So it's in the selection process of leadership where the devil's in the details. It's those details where the devil resides. So I don't have any current concerns. I think a concern would be when, not if, the health consortium has 100 members. Does it turn into a congressional lobbying style effort every year for who gets elected to leadership? I sort of hope not, but hey, that's kind of the way those larger legislative bodies work. However, we have the example of some very large consortiums in other fields. There's MEGA, which was an energy consortium formed many years ago. There's NIMIR, which is kind of a workers' comp style, and indemnity insurance company for municipalities, liability insurance, and things like that. And they seem to operate fine, even when they get larger and potentially more unwieldy. So I think, fingers crossed on that piece. At the end of the day, I don't really know that it matters too awful much. I mean, the consortium is the success of the consortium is in bending this so-called cost curve. We're not bending cost curve in health care, but we've successfully bent the cost curve in health insurance, substantially so. And so if something were to happen where any municipality was finding that they were not getting as good an insurance product or premium as they could get elsewhere, then we always retain the option to go elsewhere. The reality is that the consortium has saved last I checked, anywhere from $8 to $12 million for its member municipalities, based on what those municipalities would be paying to Excellus in the open market. So I guess that's the ultimate check, Ben, on something getting away from us, is if we find a better deal somewhere else, then we can always go there.
The distance between current and a better deal is pretty vast. You know, I mean, there's a lot to lose before we get to that check. But I mean, ultimately, you not being concerned is enough that I will not be concerned. But there was a comment period for this, I feel like 8 months ago or something. Was it that long ago? Was that the 2020 version? I feel like I missed, like I blacked out for a moment, and then there's another one of these happening already.
It was, the comment period was on the proposed 2021 MCA. That comment period was only about 4 months ago, and it just feels like 4 years ago because it's 2020. But yeah, that comment period was, we essentially said we had no comment. And so this is the end product.
Well, I'm happy with it then. Thank you for clarifying.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions on all things health insurance? If not, then I would entertain a motion to, may as well do it all at once. I would entertain a motion to approve both the final 2020 MCA and the 2021 revised MCA, and authorize me to sign both on behalf of the village.
So moved.
Second.
Any additional comments or questions? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Time is kickoff, Keith.
Oh, that's well behind us.
Okay. I had an addition to the agenda, which I'll cover now. Ann alluded to it. The Anna Kellis of the county legislature has been studying this ongoing conversation regarding rural broadband, particularly in the age of COVID, and what we've seen, any of us with school-age children, which is most of us. Ben Carver he's not in school yet. I didn't think so.
No, not quite.
Yeah, knocking on the door. But the school shutdown in the spring highlighted, significant inequities with the ability of some kids to be able to get online, to get their lesson plans and their virtual classrooms and whatnot. And of course, we've heard anecdotal stories of, you've got broadband on 2 parallel roads, and there's a connecting road in between, and they can't get internet because they're the only house on the road, and the company won't string a cable to their house, kind of stuff. So that's pretty typical in rural areas of the US and in upstate New York. The proposal that we're being asked to consider is in the Dropbox. It's near the bottom under Reso supporting ST and OTR. So the Cliff Notes version of this is, there have been various concepts bandied about a way to bridge this gap between private enterprise, which won't run high-speed internet to a single house if it's going to be a loss to them, bridging the gap between that and some type of a municipal answer. There have been, the focus has tended to be on municipally owned or municipally run internet infrastructure of one type or another. But there is since we just mentioned the consortium, there is a municipal consortium style organization already in existence. They've been in existence for quite some time. that's what the STN stands for. They are the Southern Tier Network. They were originally seeded, interestingly enough, in 2011, which is when the health consortium was formed. They were seeded in 2011 with grant funding from Corning Incorporated. Now, as you may or may not know, probably you know, Corning Inc. is one of the world's largest producers of fiber optic cable. So they certainly had a vested interest in promoting broadband, but they still gave a significant multi-million-dollar grant to this municipal cooperative to put fiber in the ground throughout, connecting various areas in the Southern Tier. I'm not a techie. Ben Darfler can explain it better than I can, I'm sure. But the infrastructure that was developed is referred to as dark fiber. So it's not fiber that's in use unless or until an internet service provider leases it. But it allows for cost savings in some cases to the internet service provider because they're not building out the network. But it also allows for the municipalities in this consortium that own the fiber to negotiate rates with the ISPs so that we can get not only better rates to broadband, but some control over where the broadband is built out. Legislator Kellis has done a fair bit of work and is requesting of the county legislature an $80,000 allocation to do an official study with deliverables, including where the build out should occur, whether or not we can join STN as part of their collaborative, how this might look in coming years, what the business and operation models would look like, who is going to be in charge of operations and maintenance and so forth. And you can read some of the details in this resolution. Now, this resolution was put together by Irene Weiser, who's a town council person in the town of Caroline. This is specific to Caroline. There are some things in it that I'm not entirely sure are relevant to the village. Some sections I'm sure are not relevant to the village. We are fortunate here in Trumansburg to have two high-speed internet options. At times, one in particular draws more complaints than the other, but at least we have options. But you only have to throw a stone from the village line in any direction to find an area in Ulysses, Hector, or Covert where you can't get internet. So I think this is a proposal certainly worth supporting from the perspective of requesting that the legislature take this up. Where Irene and the town of Caroline and Ann mentioned a couple of other municipalities have taken the additional step is they have said that, not unlike the health consortium again, that they would commit some money to help offset the cost of this study once the study is contracted. So we're not just writing a check to the county and saying, here, do something with this money. We're saying that if the study is actually contracted, we will help to defray some of the cost. And so it's up to this board whether A, we want to support the effort through resolution requesting that the county move forward with this, and then secondly, whether we want to support the effort really from a perspective of being a good neighbor to those other municipalities whose residents really struggle with broadband offerings and options. Being a good neighbor, is it in the village? Is it in the best interests of village residents to support that? I think we could certainly make the argument that it is. If it improves service reliability, long-term, does it improve costs from what we have offered to us? I think that's entirely possible. But I did tell Anna that I would bring this to the board tonight and see how everyone feels about it.
Has there,
On behalf of the rural residents of Tompkins County.
As Tammy glitches while she says that, yeah.
Yep.
I don't know,
Yeah,
Ann,
that-
if you know, has there been any conversation with OTTC that does the fiber in Trumansburg, and it looks like north of here too? be curious to know if they're able to kind of join in this, or if this would be competing with them, or how that would look.
I'm thinking at this point, well, I know we haven't talked with them, but I thinking at this point it might be premature, because some of the things like down the road, it could flesh out that they could, if we could get the fiber to certain areas, like, so for instance, as Tammy said, rural areas, you don't have to go very far. I'm over on Swamp College between Halseyville and Podunk, and both of those roads had high speed. And 15 years later, since we bought our house, we finally got OTTC. They put their higher speed fiber on Swamp College Road. So one of the reasons I wanted to say that it's not just getting some type of internet, but as Roran mentioned, high speed internet, because think about it, the old electricity that people used to have in their house would be 50, 60 amps for some lights, maybe some radios. But what people are doing, especially now, what they're needing is the higher speed. Like, so for instance, again, here on Swamp College, we had, for those who know, internet, 4 megabytes up download before OTTC put the high speed fiber on our road a couple of months ago. So now we can get their base high speed is 100 megabytes. And so now I'm not getting kicked off of Zoom meetings. I mean, they were freezing up all the time. So it's really a hardship for a lot of people now, where their kids are at home, the parents maybe are at work, that you have telehealth. So I just wanted to put that plug in there to help understand it. But so down the road, getting back to your question, it could be that if we get some dark fiber up here that's municipally sponsored, and hopefully through a lot of grants we might be able to get, then we might say, oh, OTTC, can you do these little areas because it's cheaper, because they didn't have to put the main wire in. So we might work with them later. And of course, that would be my preference versus somebody like Spectrum to get more of the business for the local people. But we also might do a deal with them, like, hey, if you're using our fiber, can you make it, ratchet down the price a little bit to help make it more affordable for people?
So Ben, I did attend a webinar on this a couple of weeks ago with Steve Manning, who's the executive director of STN. He has been in touch with Paul Griswold at OTTC. They have had some constructive talks. There's no official partnership. I think that the way the structure is set up, it wouldn't fall to Tompkins County or the village or individual municipal members to do any type of negotiating. OTTC being an ISP, they would be talking directly with STN if there was any room for collaboration. But it sounds like the conversations were extremely constructive, and there was a desire to build out more broadband everywhere if possible. One of STN, and I don't have the map, but one of STN's primary hubs comes from the Binghamton area up to Cornell. And of course, OTTC way back when ran fiber down 96 to a hub on the Commons for the trust company, and then connected that up to Cornell. So there's already some interconnections. Whether they're already being used or partnered together, I don't know.
So I'm a little confused about the purpose of the survey. The $80,000 survey is to assess the need in Tompkins County.
It would be for who isn't served at all by decent internet, and then who are the underserved area, and then figuring out how to get it here. One of the things that I'm going to propose is that we put the money in contingent fund, because there's other counties that are getting their survey done right at this time, adjacent counties. So I would want to see what theirs says, because for instance, if their information that comes out is totally not useful, then why would we pay for a survey that doesn't give us the information?
Great. And then similarly, right, so two things that I want to point out. Like, I lived in Hector, and once upon a time we had the rural land easement, which meant that NYSEG had to bring the electricity because it was considered I had to pay for a certain amount, but they couldn't make me bear the whole burden simply because I was rural, because it was considered, what, someone help me with the words, a necessity of life.
Right.
So
Utility.
a utility. And so they couldn't make me pay everything just because I was rural. And so are we hoping that the power of this survey can give some leverage to that, so that we can say children need an education, people need to be able to work, and this is actually a utility and not a luxury?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and Ann can speak to this from the county's perspective. I think that the broadest push, which would be at the state level, the broadest push would be to designate broadband internet access as an essential utility. And then if so, then it puts some limits on, it creates, so look, we're
Some regulation on cost.
It's regulate. I mean, so using an example later on in our overly lengthy agenda, we're going to talk about LED streetlights. There's a state level commission which ensures that certain policies are followed, timelines are followed, and costs are controlled with respect to a municipality being able to buy streetlights from, in this case, NICEAG. Those types of controls don't exist for broadband right now.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the study is to specifically, it's a multi-factor, larger scale version of what we need MRB to do with the footbridge. We need to identify specifically where are the areas in Tompkins County that actually need it. We know Tammy needs it, but where are the actual streets between this street and that road that actually need it? What would it cost to build to get it there? What would it cost to operate and maintain that infrastructure? And then that study, which costs $80,000 to put together, will come back with a number like 8.2 million. And I'm making that up completely. If it costs $8 million to build out what's needed, or 18 million or 28 million, then STN is established and has a budget and has funding, but we'll know whether they are able to fund any of it. What's the county's buy-in going to be? Is that going to come through grant money? Is it going to be bonded? All of the financing type questions can be answered once we know what it's actually going to cost. What we know for sure is that there are sections of the county where it's not cost effective. And some of the wording in this particular resolution, I don't, as you all know, we all work for companies or we're business owners. I don't really blame the ISPs for not running a line down a road where they're going to lose thousands of dollars to do it. I wouldn't do it. So this is where a municipal answer is probably the only answer, because it's simply just not going to be cost effective for the private sector to do it. And we'll find out just what we would actually be on the hook for financially through this study being conducted.
That's very helpful.
I would just add that it's possible that we could go back to the state and say, hey, you allocated money before to get the last mile service, but here are the gaps that never got filled. So, I mean, if it wasn't if we didn't have COVID and this great financial crisis that we're in, I would be more hopeful with the state at this point. I'm more hopeful with our municipalities trying to do it. But we'll see. I mean, Anna Kellis is a big proponent of it, and she would help at the state level too.
At some, and I'll only spend 10 seconds on this digression, at some level and at some point, a lot of rural services are going to have to come front burner for the state. And whether it's broadband or emergency services, these are the things that private sector simply can't do. And so the push is, the topics are different, but the push is really the same.
I would just weigh in that I'm totally in support of supporting the survey. I don't know where we are in the budget to talk about funds supporting the survey, but at least to lend credence to it, to say that my children are virtual learners now, that I'm working remotely from Corning Museum of Glass, just had to upgrade in order to keep my job and get these kids an education, and luckily live in the village, so they didn't charge me to connect to the fiber. But had I been 2 streets over or not in the village, then I wouldn't have necessarily had that option. And I want to recognize that. I also want to recognize that as a larger, and I know we're not the school district, that we're the village, but our children are coming from remote areas to be here, and so are our workers. So to ignore the people who don't have the same access that we do, I think would be irresponsible.
I agree strongly with that sentiment. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. I think if it wasn't obvious before COVID, it's certainly obvious now that this is a necessity in modern life. I think, like Jessica said, it's like the question becomes how much do we want to support it from a financial perspective, not whether we support it, in principle. So I think passing the resolution is as simple as a decision we'll ever get to make. The question is how much we allocate towards it. And I would just say for my my 2 cents is, I've often argued in terms of youth services that those can be viewed through the lens of sort of preventative security measures, right? So we provide youth services, we provide funding to the library, after school programs, all of these things. And those are ways that we keep our communities safe and healthy. And I think this, to me, fits in the same boat. I think this is a great way to keep our communities healthy, functional. I think this is great. I would be happy to lend money to it. I mean, personally, to be quite frank. And if we can find a way to put it in our budget, I would love to do it.
So I'll echo what everyone's saying with that, like absolutely in support of this. I think it's an important conversation. And as I'm hearing more about it and I was looking around a little bit on the side too, just now, I think there's probably a million different ways this can go. I think a lot of them make a lot of sense. Some of them might make less sense to me, just kind of conceptually, but no concern at this point. I mean, we're still very early in the process of like just digging in and starting to get some information that we can make better decisions on. I unfortunately feel a little weird about putting village dollars against this, which is a plan that very clearly in my mind would be as Roden put it, like a nice neighbor type of thing. Like I don't suspect, I mean, my quick look at what OTTC supports right now, I think that's in the entire village, plus much of our neighbors to the north and some into Ulysses as well. So I'm a little bit on the fence there. I'm not like a strong hard no on it, but I'm kind of tentative on putting actual dollars up against it. I'm curious to hear what others think.
Yeah, I was thinking something similar, just in that this is a county project, right? I mean, looking at, right. I mean, if we talk about serving our school district, and I totally get that. I mean, we have, in this remote world we live in, we have a lot of kids that need it for our school district, but a lot of our school district crosses county borders, right? So I'm just wondering how much, and I'm not shooting anything down by any means, but I'm just curious how much of our school district actually doesn't get incorporated into this study.
Well, one possibility, so I did not promise, because I wouldn't dare, I did not promise Anna an answer tonight, but what we could consider, a couple of thoughts. One is rewording this resolution to make it relevant to the village, bringing that back at our November meeting. If we did decide to allocate any funding towards it, we could build that into because this resolution states that they'll contribute in 2021. So we could actually build this into our 2021 budget. So we don't have to rob Peter to pay Paul in the current budget year. And then one suggestion that I could make to, and Ann, certainly comment if you think this is a non-starter, but a suggestion I could make to Anna and to Steve at SDN is that they widen the scope of the study to include those portions of Seneca and Schuyler counties that the Trumansburg School District covers. And so you would have to look at, part of Dryden School District, I believe, goes into Cortland County. So maybe it's because of the way the school districts settle, maybe STN should widen that study. I don't think they would need the approval of those counties. If they did, then, you know, that's a fly in the ointment. But if they don't actually need approval to do it, they just need funding to do it, and we can get them to expand the scope of the study to cover just those regions of these adjacent counties where Tompkins County-based school districts reside, then I think we could go for it without really feeling like we're missing something.
Personally, I really like that. I didn't think about that, but that provides hopefully could provide more equity for the students versus just the, you know, because we know Trumansburg School goes over into other counties. So rather than just the students that are here, you know, getting better internet or some internet. So I really like that proposal, and I can bring that back to Anna.
And I can reword this resolution to build that in, that essentially we're supportive of it in concept, and we would support it with some funding, as long as, you know, build in, you know, I don't think the as long as needs to be part of the support in concept, but if we are going to commit funds, I think that, you know, we're not the school district, so I'm sure someone will find a way to criticize us on that front, but at least it makes sense. I mean, the school is here in the village, and we have students far flung from us, so we'll be taking some initiative there, and who knows, maybe the school would even be willing to add some support.
And maybe the town of Enfield and the town of Ulysses and the village could kind of work together to say, the three of us are going to do this if the school district is covered. Because the school district does go down through Enfield.
Does the town of Enfield have a board to pass a resolution yet?
I'm going to talk to them at their meeting tomorrow night.
Get myself in trouble. Don't tell them I said that.
Okay.
So does that sound good? Any other thoughts or comments on that piece? Okay. Longest mayor's report in history. Next up, Fire Commissioner Giles has a ring to it.
Hi. So I see it's Fire Commissioner Giles and also the Trumansburg Area Chamber of Commerce. So I'm going to report on that first, which is I will soon be making contact with the Trumansburg Area Chamber of Commerce so that I can have something to report on. And feel free to email me anything that you've thought of in the meantime. And I am going to let Matt, yay, there is a little angel that was just by his shoulder. So Matt Taylor is with us, and he has some discussion for us about some things we need to think about for equipment. Matt?
To get to my unmute button. So a few things. I want to pass a resolution tonight with the board to put the old pickup truck, the Ford F-250, up for sale. As you may know, we've been in the works for over a year now since we ordered the new pickup truck. Due to COVID, Chevrolet had shut down their plant, and it is now at Gorman up in Alma, New York, getting upfitted. So the old truck has been off the road for about a month. So that just needs resolution to come, basically to be set up for sale as no longer a need to the village. Secondly, I sent Jessica an email. I got a couple of quotes. Jason used to do the truck services every fall with the trucks through Jerome. So in good faith, what I did is I reached out to Jerome and to Gorman to give me a bid. Gorman came in at around their base bid was 7,000. Jerome's was 10. So I'd like to move forward with them, but there was a few add-ons that were kind of unknowns, like ladder testing and generators, because they don't know our trucks all that well. So I added it all up. We're right around between 8,500 and 9,000. We're still under the Jerome bid. The trucks would leave here, go to Alma for a couple of days and be serviced, top to bottom, front to back, in and out, all those directions. And I think it would be a good expenditure on the village's part for the fact that we're talking about $1 million pieces of apparatus that we have to try to squeeze 20 or 22 or 23 years out of. And good maintenance goes a long ways when it comes time to put those units to work in life-saving situations or property preservation. And we want them to work. So I just want to move that forward as well. Other than that, we are doing pub ed at the school tomorrow. Justin Van, one of the lieutenants, organized that entire thing. So if you see him around or if you see us there tomorrow, it is a COVID compliant, socially distant pub ed. It's different for us. Typically, we go into the classrooms and talk to the children. This year, they're coming to us outside where we can do it under a tent, under much better control and things of that nature. So we're pretty excited about that. I know the kids are, for something besides a computer and a teacher on the other side of a screen trying to teach a lesson. So hopefully we can give them something to cheer about tomorrow. So that's all I have on my end.
That's great. Thanks for the reminder of that public outreach. So and I'm just going to cheer randomly throughout the day tomorrow, so I don't have to remember the exact timing. So it sounds like we have two things before us, right? One is that we have to pass a resolution that it's okay to sell the old vehicle. Gordon,
Yep.
Is that correct?
Right, so I would entertain a motion to declare the old Ford F-250 of the fire department of no further use to the village.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion or questions on that piece? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye. Oh, hold on. Tammy has a question.
Oh, no.
I do. How and what are we doing with it, or what and how are we doing it?
So that's up for a little bit of debate. Jason and I talked briefly on Friday when he was doing some fire extinguisher work for me. He was thinking we might be better off. That truck's in pretty rough shape underneath the body because it does sit outside. The rust kind of, has taken over, for the lack of a better term. So he thought it might be just as wise, instead of going to Auctions International or one of those folks and running that big rigmarole and probably not getting much, just putting it alongside the road with a for sale sign and doing a closed bid option. So you guys could post a bid notice with the time and date that the bids would be due. We put it along the road, people can inspect it, whatever, and then have a bid opening night, whether it's at the next board meeting or however you folks decide to do it.
That answers my question.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to declare the Ford F-250 of no further use to the village. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
One more thing, Matt. Might I suggest when you get the information to me for the ad for the sealed bid, that you may set a reserve price on it?
Yeah, that
Just
would
a
make
thought.
sense. I agree. So if the reserve's not met, we won't sell it. Or we could negotiate either, we could reserve the right, I don't know, Rorden, if we can reserve the right to negotiate to the reserve with the highest bidder.
We did it, I think, with the last Tahoe. I think we got a bid under reserve and then we just negotiated with that person.
Right. Okay.
As long as there was equitable opportunity for someone else. We're not picking who we're going to sell it to without offering it to anyone or
Right.
offering it to everyone else, then we're usually
Right.
in good shape.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt.
So that just passed, right? We all said aye.
Yes, ma'am.
And so then what do we have to do for Matt to be able to move forward using Gorman instead of Jerome?
You just pull the quote. So we would just need a resolution to accept the quote from Gorman Emergency Vehicles dated October 12th for maintenance, annual truck and pump maintenance for the fire department.
Just reminder, Rorden, that bid was based at 7,000. So there's some ads for the ladders and stuff like that.
So then we'll say that, all right, so I would then entertain a motion to accept the quotation for annual truck and pump maintenance from Gorman Emergency Vehicles dated October 12th with the addition of additional maintenance items for a total cost not to exceed $10,000.
So moved.
Second.
That 10 should cover it, right, Matt?
Yeah, that'll more than cover it.
Any comments or questions on that piece? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you
Any
very much,
opposed?
everyone.
Thank you,
And
Matt.
for-
Have fun tomorrow.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
Matt.
you.
And so everyone knows, my village email is fully functional and I can respond from there. So game on.
Perfect.
Thanks, Matt.
Any questions for Jessica or anything else from Jessica for us about fire or chamber?
I'm done.
Okay. EMS, Youth and Street Tree Advisory.
So, don't have much to report for EMS. The one thing is what I mentioned at the top of the meeting, which is also the thing I mentioned at every meeting for the last maybe 3 months, which is Chris has been pursuing using EMS charts instead of image trend to make our reports and to also do the PCRs and basically do all of the patient-centric reporting. I'm not sure exactly how to term it for the department. So, you know, the providers would use that to enter all of their information on a call or after the call. And then it also becomes our record of that call. So it would be helpful for us. I know a lot of you had things that you would like to see as far as a monthly report from the EMS department. Those things have been very hard to get through image trend. So the hope is that EMS charts will be much easier. We have a number of providers who work in other agencies that use it, which is why Chris pursued this initially. And we have quotes for EMS charts to be used. So the hang up is we have not budgeted for this money. I think it is essential. I haven't had a chance to sit down with Chris yet to go through where we would want to take it out of the budget. So I don't think we're ready to move that, or I'm certainly not ready to make that motion. But what I am hoping we can do is authorize Rorden to sign the contract, so we won't be able to pay it. But once we've gone through and found if it's possible, that we could start to move in that direction mid-month. So that's my hope. The basic element is essentially we would get to use EMS charts for a year, would be $2,461.80. Or if we sign a 3-year contract instead of just a year, it would be $6,175.80. So it's about $400 to cut the contract down, which normally would not, it wouldn't be worth doing. But since we haven't budgeted for this amount, I'm considering doing it. I think it's the way to go for this year. But I wanted to get feedback, especially about authorizing Rorden to sign the contract. Should we, come to a conclusive result before our next meeting? I don't know. I'm a little bit up in the air. This sort of, I know it's a little bit 11th hour, but I wanted to run it by everyone. I know Chris is really sort of, I don't know if anxious is the right word, but he's excited to move to EMS charts. I think it'll be a much better program. So I guess looking for feedback from you all on that front.
Is that 2,400 a year?
Yes. Yeah, and I believe Image Trend was a little strange. So their bill to us, and Vicky, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it was 1,681 or 1,861 maybe, or something like that.
It was 1,648, and we just paid that in July.
Right. And this is another cost that we had not budgeted for, because that one, I don't know who was here for it, but that one came from a grant that expired. So I think we had, I forget how many years we had that, and then the grant expired and we had to pay for it.
I believe
Three.
it was 3.
I think so too.
That was the grant none of us knew was being applied for.
Yes.
Yeah, well, and it was also a grant that I believe was supposed to get us computers for it was a whole thing. Anyway, so here we are. We have this possibility. So the tricky thing about the Image Trend is that contract also included a per chart fee that, as far as I know, we haven't been assessed. So I believe the 1,600 will not. I think it was a $2 per chart fee or something like that. So I don't know when that will be assessed. That price will go up.
I think we have been. I'm going to look it up, Ben, for you.
Oh, that'd be great.
I'm a little confused, Ben. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
You want us to authorize Roden to sign a contract, which won't actually commit us to funding that contract?
No, if he signed it, it would. But I don't have the
But we're not sure
specific-
where this 2,400 will come
Right.
from yet. But
Right.
you're not
So I
worried
don't
about
have-
that because it'll come from somewhere.
No, I'm worried about that. But then
Okay.
Roden wouldn't sign it. Right. So we would be authorizing Roden to sign it if the money exists and if we wanted. I mean, I think it's a good idea. I think it's worthwhile. But if we don't have the money, then we can't. And we are tight. I mean, it's not great. Go ahead, Vicky.
I'm sorry. Without having the file here, I'd have to look at the bill because the bill a year ago was 1,600 flat. This was 1,648. So I need to look, but if I'm imagining it correctly, that 1,600 is those 800 files. But again, I'd have to look at, I can pull the bill out tomorrow and scan it.
Well, so maybe it's best if I just hold off. I was a little bit nervous about bringing this because it felt a little bit last minute. But if people are more comfortable with it, there's no real harm in waiting. And does that feel better to folks?
Yeah, let's find the money. Let's find the money and then
go from there.
Yeah, confirm the cost differential.
Okay.
And then if it all still looks appropriate, then we can take care of it at our November meeting.
Sure.
And I'm sure we would all be in agreement that a good software tool is what they should have
is.
if we can do it, right? We're not saying, no,
Yeah.
play with the abacus more.
Well, it's not quite that bad. But anyway, so we have, if we move on from there. Oh, Vicky, I wanted to check quick that the budget was updated to reflect 32,000 in supplies after our joint meeting. That was in there. Okay, great. Because I was looking through the budget quick before this meeting and I didn't see it, but it was just.
Yep.
All right, great. We have, so for September, we had 15 calls and 12 transports. We are hovering between 28 and 29% of the total for our district, which is higher than historic. So our last year's total went up. So we'll see if that holds and how that works out moving forward. For the Youth Commission, our conversation is mostly centered around the supplemental school program, that program that was over at the fairgrounds. It's a little bit strange. We had done some surveying, or not, I hadn't done, I'm sorry, but Will at the town and Ethan and Paul were the three primary, leads on that, I guess, had done some survey work, both sort of officially and, just asking around. And it seemed like everyone and their cousin was going to sign up for this thing. And then we've had hovering right around 10 to 15 participants, which I think in kind of this COVID world is fairly common. So people are like, yes, please, any programming, I would love to do that in concept. And then when you hear the reality of what the programming actually looks like, people sort of pull back a little bit. And it's like, well, if you would have to cancel it at zero notice if someone tests positive, you know, that turns a lot of people off and all of that. But I did want to point out that they've received a number of calls from, oh geez, I'm forgetting the organizations. But anyway, a few different organizations that run similar programs or want to, and no one has done this before. So they're getting those sort of calls that are like, you are a leader, you are the first people who have done this. Your group is really sort of trailblazing. Do you have any advice for us? And I just wanted to share that because I was really, really proud of them. When I heard that, I think, you know, I'm proud. I think this board should be proud that we have helped them and we've lent support to that. I think it's a great sort of Trumansburg come together moment.
T-Berg strong.
Yeah, really. So we'll be moving to the Nature Center later in the week. That was a little bit up in the air until a couple weeks ago, but it looks like that's moving forward. And one just quick thing to add is that obviously the difficulty with the Nature Center becomes transportation. So I talked with you guys at the beginning of this and asked if you had any advice. So now if you have any advice or any thoughts on how we can transport a bunch of kids from here to there, that would be great. Any bright ideas? Obviously, Will has been looking into buses and all of that, and it's going to work, but it's a mess.
Where is here again? Where are we trying to get from?
Well, everywhere. I mean, it's the school district. That said, most of them, well, all of the kids who have participated have found a way to get to the village, so to get to school. So when I say here, I mean the village, just because that's, you know, the established hub.
Got it.
That said, if they could go from houses, or if there was a way to magically have a you know, COVID safe taxi, some sort of Amazon delivery drone that was human safe, you know, anything and everything is on the table at this point. But yeah, so that's it. We're also getting a lot of county level updates about their funding for youth programs and that kind of thing. But they're really, to be honest with you, there isn't a huge amount of impact at this point. It's mostly just funding will remain flat, which seems to be true at county. The town seems to be leading that way. And even the city programs that we sort of overlap with are going that way. So then not a huge amount of impact there. For the tree committee, we have, I don't know if you guys saw in the Dropbox, there was reimbursements that fit. As you all know, we had budgeted $5,000 to take out the 7 most dangerous trees in public right-of-ways. All of those trees except one have now been dealt with. There are a couple loose ends and stump grinding and payments and stuff, but we have enough done that I'm confident the remainder will fit within our budget. So I wanted to start those reimbursements going out. You can feel free to look at what they are specifically if you want to see, but those hopefully will go out as soon as Vicky can do that.
Ben, can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
You have a what if?
Yeah.
Okay. And there's a column. Some of the people that didn't pay anything, you were still reimbursing?
Yeah, so that's what if they pay for things. So they haven't ground the stumps. They haven't completed it all yet. So there's still a possibility that they will.
So we should only pay the people that have given us receipts.
You should only pay the people that have next to their names in the column that says approved reimbursements.
Okay.
What is in the column that says approved reimbursements?
Okay, because
it's the green highlighted column. We can talk about it later. I thought it was
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I was just confused because I need some sort of backup, something to pay them. And I have it for 3 people.
I'm not sure. What do you mean by backup?
She needs a
Like,
receipt or an invoice of some kind.
yeah.
Right. You should have that for everyone who's on that list.
No, I don't. I only have it for 3 of them.
All right. Well, we'll continue this conversation
Okay, that's fine.
post meeting, but
Yeah.
those are all ready to go except this last bit between Vicky and I, and then we'll be going forward.
Okay.
And then on to next year. We have a stack meeting next week, I believe it is. So I'll have more updates for the next meeting, and I will leave it there.
Any questions for Ben? Moving on to DPW, water, sewer, CPZR, farmers market.
Just racking them up.
Partridge in the pear tree.
Yeah. It's all right. Buckle up. Let's see. I'll start with farmers market. The interesting news from the farmers market is that they will be doing a Thanksgiving market this year. No, it's November 23rd from 12 to 2. It's a Monday before Thanksgiving. So keep an eye out for that. I think that's a wonderful idea that the market's come up with, and they're going to start working on some PR and marketing around that, I'm sure. Otherwise, the market continues to carry on. I think they've got just a few more weeks. I think Halloween is kind of their last week. I've lost track exactly, but things are starting to wind up as we start to move through the fall. On the CPZR front, we have our November meeting is this Thursday. We hope to be substantially complete on the draft chapters of the comp plan. So that's a pretty big milestone for the committee there. Might have a few outstanding details to hammer out after we get through that last meeting, but hopefully we can get pretty much everything figured out, and if not, wrapped up in short order after that. The rest of the meeting, I'm hoping to have a conversation with EDR on kind of what do they anticipate for next steps. We will have at that point the chapters for the comp plan, kind of the content of that drafted up, but they'll still want to put that in the final presentation with the pictures and the typesetting and all that kind of jazz. So we'll have to see how long that'll take. And then how this board wants to start reviewing that, when that actually comes up, and we could potentially start, reviewing the content sooner and then look again after the official kind of draft from EDR is done, or we could wait for that draft to be done and kind of in its full glory and take a look at it then. I'll see if EDR has suggestions, but if anyone here has an opinion, we can definitely talk through that. And then the question, of course, comes to zoning after that. My impression so far has been that EDR is going to take more of the lead on that, which I think is better for these more kind of technical conversations around zoning. They've given us draft kind of recommendations, I would say, as to where they think the zoning needs the most kind of focus and improvement. And I would say that recommendation is more of a, here's what we think, do you agree kind of situation. So we've been giving them some feedback around that as well. My hope is that takes much less time than the comprehensive plan really does, that EDR will kind of do more of the legwork there. Unlike kind of our first approach at zoning a couple of years ago, where it was a bit more committee led. I think we realized that the committee is best utilized to kind of give input on where we're seeing problems, especially from the ZBA and the planning board perspective, but actually having a committee try to decide, is it 35 feet or 36 feet or, that kind of a thing, doesn't really benefit us. So I think we'll leave a lot of that conversation for EDR. So we're starting to draw close on the comp plan, and if people have thoughts or ideas on any of those topics, hit me up, or we can have a conversation here towards the end of the rest of my pieces here. On the DPW front, just a couple notes. Leaf pickup started today and will continue through the day before Thanksgiving. weather permitting, but we do have the new leaf truck. So hopefully we'll be able to collect leaves in more inclement weather. And hopefully we don't have freak snowstorms in October or earlier November like we did last year that caused a bunch of problems for the leaf pickup. Or late leaf drops well into December or whatever craziness was happening last year. It is 2020 though, so who knows? That's the most for DPW on the water side. We did bring well 1 back online. I think some folks did notice some discoloration in the water as that came back on, but that's a great step back to having full redundancy now with all of our wells. So that I kind of mentioned on Facebook in a post around that, the way the wells work, and this is new for me as well, as we've got a number of them down at Teganic and around Teganic, and we rotate through different configurations of them to keep exercising all the different wells. We have at least 2 wells that could fully individually support the village. And so this way we kind of keep everything in good working order, and should anything be a problem or we need maintenance or anything, we're well capable of handling that situation. And so then the last part comes down to sewer. I see there's something about September late fees, which I'll admit I'm not up to speed on. I don't know if someone else wants to speak to that.
Yeah, I'll take that as soon as you're done.
All right. So maybe we'll come to that second. Then actually, I will point. I'll kind of mention the draft sewer law. So we've had this massive tome of a sewer law kicking around over the past couple of months. I appreciate Ben diving in and giving some feedback on that. I've had time to review it in more depth recently. So I wanted to kind of have a quick conversation here about next steps. I don't know if others had wanted to weigh in or spend more time with the document and give feedback. I'm also open to kind of leading a push to kind of collate Ben's comments, Deb's comments, my own comments, if anyone else has any, before we do that, and pass that back off to, I suppose, MRB for kind of a second revision before we move forward. But I kind of wanted to bring up the conversation here. Where do we want to take that conversation? What's kind of next steps there?
So what I'd like to do is one of my final village-related conversations with Deb was that we would give time for everyone who wants to wade through that. And it is a slog. Whoever wants to wade through that from the board, and then Ben, myself, and it's Matt and at least 2 others from MRB, that we would have a sit-down meeting and kind of work through, rather than passing it back to them and having them decipher what we think we don't like, because some of it could be statutory, some of it is kind of EPA boil. So some of this is really dense, why do we need it, is a fair comment, but they're just going to say, well, DEC really likes you to have it in there, kind of thing, versus the things that are entirely up to us. Who is in charge of enforcement? Who is in charge of surveillance? What are the fees going to be? Those kinds of things. So I think Jessica and Keith, entirely up to you whether you want to tackle how many pages is it? 80, 90?
Yeah. Just shy of 100.
If you want to tackle 10,000 words of sewer law, or wait for the next draft and take a look at that one, because I would like to get back to MRB on it. Looking at a calendar, before Thanksgiving. I'd like to sit down with them, Ben, if we could, before Thanksgiving, and say, here's what we need better understanding of whether it's really necessary or not, and then adjust the things that are up to us that we want to see done differently. Keith, Jessica, either one?
Is that document in Dropbox?
It is from a couple of months ago. I'd have to find it, or I'll email it to you.
And then I would say, so, it's a fool who tries to be an expert in everything. Are you saying that it would be useful to have some other eyes on this? Or are you feeling like you guys can be the experts on this?
It's only been 2 meetings. You're already calling me names.
I'm happy to lend another set of eyes and don't actually mind reading legal documents. And I just finished my book, so I'm not going to say the title here in public. So you'd let me know. I'm not sure what the ask is. Happy to be helpful. If it's not really needed, happy to focus on other things.
I'll kind of throw it back to you. I think I feel like we've had enough eyes on it. I appreciate kind of wanting to kind of move forward at this point. That said, the more eyes, the merrier. So the ask is, if this is something you're intrigued by, feel free to take a read, and we'll happily wait for that feedback. And if it's something you are comfortable kind of leaning back on, and we can kind of pull it forward, I'm happy to do that as well. I think now between myself, Deb, and Rorden and Ben's comments, I think we have a decent coverage of at least the egregious issues.
And I think that what my approach will be is to treat it like the Odyssey, which was assigned in high school. I'll read enough of it to make sure that I understand what to refer back to should I have deeper questions, and to be able to follow along in the next conversations that come up.
Yeah, and I actually think fresh set of eyes on whatever the next draft looks like would be helpful. Because then by then, if it comes back looking like something that would satisfy Deb's comments, both Ben's comments, and my read of it, then any questions that come out of that reading from you or Keith would then, hopefully, we would have an explanation for it. Or if we don't, we'll say, whoops, we missed that.
Yeah, I guess I've never felt like I need to bring anything additional to this discussion. Comments were pretty thorough, and I think just seemed like it was always in good hands, so I have no problems letting it move forward.
Okay. Yeah, then if that works, Ben, maybe where'd my calendar go? Do you want to email Matt and start looking at some dates towards the end of the month, first part of November?
Yeah, I can start that up. I've been meaning to have a chat with him anyhow, just to kind of get set up so we could roll that kind of together.
Okay. The September late fees. So back a few months ago, when we adopted or revised our current sewer fee law, or we actually amended our old sewer law to change the sewer fees, we added a clause which allowed for us to waive late fees during a state of emergency. We are billing every month, so there was a September water bill. So I am bringing back to the board, as we are still in a declared state of emergency, whether we would like to waive late fees on any water and sewer bill paid on or after October 1st.
Did we have a count or a sense of how many folks ran into this previously? Right? Because did we do this for August's bill? If I remember.
Would have been the July bill.
Or the July bill, yeah.
Tammy, a sense of the numbers we're looking at of late payments? Tammy or Morgan?
If you can give me a minute, I can certainly look at them. But no, I wouldn't dare to guess. Morgie?
I don't know. There wasn't a lot. I'd say probably around like 15 or 20, maybe. I don't know.
Not an unusually large number.
No.
No.
Yeah, I'm inclined to keep waiving them as long as we're in a crisis.
Do we want to then, just so we're not revisiting this every other month, do we want to just state that we're going to waive late fees for as long as the state of emergency remains in effect in New York State?
I agree with that approach. Yeah.
Would the bill still come out with a due date? I mean, I feel like that's the other thing, like,
Yeah,
it's
it
good to
doesn't.
hold us
It
all
doesn't
accountable,
Yeah, it doesn't change the due date.
but would it still say the amount, it's got two amounts, the late amount and the paid on time amount? Would it still show both those amounts? We would just end up
It
waiving
will.
it?
I can override the late amount. That's not a big deal.
Well, I'm not sure we should. Like, I'm just playing the devil's advocate here, which is that, right? Like sometimes it's just good to try to meet those moments when you can. And if you don't, then they can get lost. And then you're weeks past when you meant to have already paid it. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know how you manage that.
I think that's a good thought, but we could probably mitigate that. Like if Tammy, if you would tell us if there's a spike, like if people see that we're waiving the late fees and everyone uses that as an excuse to not pay it, let us know if there's a spike in late fees and we can follow up then and maybe revise our.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to be aware too that we're kind of trying to form a history now, right? I mean, for the last 15 years, I've been billing every 3 months and I had a good feel of where people were and who wasn't paying and who always paid late. It's a little different now. So I don't really have a lot of, we've only had 2 billings under this current format. So I don't have a real good feeling about what those numbers look like, but we'll certainly keep an eye on it. What I have noticed is I don't think that it has changed much. I think the people who pay their bill late are just the people who pay their bill late.
So we're suggesting having the cards go out with just the due date and the amount. So that there's a date and an amount. Is that what we're saying?
No, it'll still have the late fee on it.
It still would show a late fee.
I would say due on and then due after. I wouldn't change anything about the cards. We don't want to mess up the billing cycle. But the handful that do come in after the due date, we simply won't assess the late fee.
Right. And if they pay it, right. And if they pay it, they just end up with a credit on their account. So no harm, no foul.
Unless they don't know they have a credit on their account.
Well, that'll show up in the next
will
billing.
the next time you get billed because it'll show.
But so how will they explain what the credit was for? How will they know that?
Oh, they'll call Tammy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that generating more work? Does it need to be?
Yeah.
People have no hesitation.
No,
People have no hesitation about calling Tammy with questions about their water bill.
Yeah, also because we're all feel swirly about utilities in general, right? Thank you, NYSEG.
Yes.
Okay, all right. As long as it's not
no
for the office.
Yeah, no, not at all. But thank you.
So I'm up for approving this until the state of emergency is gone or we decide to revisit it for any other reason.
So then I would entertain a motion to waive water and sewer late fees, newly incurred water and sewer late fees for the duration of New York State's COVID-related state of emergency.
So moved.
Second.
And
Any additional comments or discussion?
And that doesn't prevent us from revisiting this earlier than that, should we want to.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
And 15 to 20 late bills a cycle is somewhere between 2 and 3% of bills. So that's not a bad number. Any other comments, questions? If not, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? My only comment, Ben, on the comp plan draft, and this is certainly just my personal opinion, we can happy to acquiesce to the board's preferences if they're drastically different, but I would prefer to see EDR's final draft, less than final, but final draft. And then allow enough time for that product to be reviewed by the planning board, ZBA members, as well as this board. Potentially, depending on what kind of time is needed, potentially then hold a special meeting of this board to collate and review any specific feedback from the members of those other boards. And if there's no, whatever changes we suggest, probably should then be incorporated into a second final draft before we open it up to public comment, which will take, I would imagine, a couple of months to get good feedback from that. But while that's occurring, I don't think there's any reason that the zoning revision piece can't be going simultaneously. Because anything that changes in the comp plan after public comment can easily be found in the zoning to be adjusted.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I didn't mention, our plans, which we haven't solidified in any way, around what's the next round of kind of public comment and feedback. And so obviously there's a public hearing associated with this, but I think we'll want a longer window than just a single meeting, as you're kind of saying. So I have no problem with us kind of doing a board level review at those different boards first of the draft, and then presenting that to the broader public for a larger, for a review cycle. And my thought there is, with some sort of additional content around that, whether that's a webinar that we do with EDR or a recorded video of kind of a high level step through or something to that effect, and get feedback from the community as well, all leading up finally to that kind of public hearing for this board. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, good. Anything else
Actually,
from
yeah,
anyone?
I want to add something about that, which is I echo all of that. I agree with all of that. I'm concerned about the zoning part, and having sat on those things with you, Ben, like I get that we don't want to hash out in committee 35 feet, 12 feet, 10 feet, but I think that EDR making some core basic language, but then it should be pretty quickly reviewed with, I think, the planning board, the codes officer, that they should have some really early buy-in on the bones of the plan. If that isn't, maybe that's exactly your plan already.
Yeah. So I'll say Tom has been very much embedded in the zoning conversation and everything leading up to even that early draft of kind of where they think they should focus their time. The intent actually of Scott stepping down and Noah coming on to the committee is also with that eye towards having someone with a real strong background in zoning in the comp plan committee. And so, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I also think that, like I said, my envisionment so far of the zoning piece is that it is going to be a little bit of a tighter loop, but that means, in my mind, is that exactly that. Like, I think there'll be an early first draft that'll go through Tom and Noah and the rest of the committee. And then we'll probably do the same loop that we're talking about here with getting it to the ZBA and the planning board and this board quickly. I hope that it does not take us the very many years that the
I'm sure it won't.
Plan is also taken.
I'm sure it won't. And I must say that being on the village board, I like the part of the loop that this sits on. So that's great.
No, I think that's good. And actually, I was just doing some. 2020 feels like 2020 feels like a lot of years in one. But actually, the timeframes have been really good. So I appreciate you and the committee, keeping things moving at a decent pace. I mean, I'd have to go back and look, but I think we only named the committee members in May or June of 18. So we're not yet at 30 months. So, I mean, I knew 30 months was a ridiculous number when I named it, but there was a method to that madness. So, I mean, we're close. So I think if we get a comp plan in the next couple of months, if we have a couple more months after that to review it, and the zoning revision is taking place simultaneously, and we add a few more months for the review process of that, if we're at summer of 21, that's actually a heck of a pace to have rewritten both.
I'll pass that along to the committee. I think we're tired. We're ready to see this thing done, which I think is working out well.
Good. Yeah, no, definitely pass along my appreciation for everyone's commitment to, the upside of ridiculous timeframes is if you get close, then you're pleased. The downside is it's a lot of work and the burnout factor can be high. So I appreciate everyone's efforts and commitment to it.
Yeah, and I'll just take this moment to really thank Kathy Klemper specifically for doing just a amazing amount of work on really simplifying and tuning up the language, clarifying pieces, and really and also diving between kind of the details at the word and paragraph level to the overall structure and making sure that all the different chapters kind of interlace properly and reference each other and kind of reflect their structure. And so it's been just a pleasure working with her and with the whole committee. But she's had a huge hand in it, and I think she should be very proud of that.
That's great. That's great. Let's see. Where are we for time? Way behind. All right, Keith, you're up.
9:45, just getting to the police. Woo! We shouldn't have taken Monday off. Should have been a two-parter. All right. First, we have our monthly update, which is just 201 calls for service, 6 calls outside of the village. And nothing really crazy. We did have a semi-fast pursuit through the village a couple weekends ago that was, I think, at about 2 a.m. or so. There was a drunk driver that came through, and Officer Covert tailed the driver for over a half hour through several counties before the state police finally provided backup. And so tip of the cap to Officer Covert for sticking with it and ticketing the driver, but that investigation will ultimately be with the state police. So that was some excitement. It's unfortunate that that happens at 2 a.m. You don't get to spectate any of these things, but as a reminder, as we, I think, look at the future of the department, what we have to consider in terms of when we have help and when we have it and if we have it, and when we're on duty and when we're not on duty. So a lot of things will go into that, and I'm sure that will come out in our committees, which I'm looking forward to. I think the other thing was, I don't know, I haven't heard much from Chief regarding the speed bumps. I don't know how much we have to talk about that tonight. He's reviewing a number of options that I sent him. I think his idea was to pilot maybe a couple streets. Still kind of got to get some feedback. Once we choose a style of speed bump, we need to get some feedback from DPW about installation timeline and what that would take from them. I know Elm Street and the Elm Street, Pennsylvania, Halsey area there is definitely kind of what inspired this, but I know Chief has a couple other streets in mind where he might want to try it. So these would be removable speed bumps, as a reminder. So temporary can be taken out if it turns out that they are a nuisance or not effective. The ones I'm looking at run, probably $400 for, I want to say, like 20 feet or so. So I don't think they're overly costly. It would just kind of be a matter of where are we going to put them. And ultimately, I imagine some people will love seeing them and some people will not love seeing them. But we do know there's some streets in the village that are narrow and are 25-mile-per-hour zones that people don't treat them that way. And especially that intersection, again, where Halsey and Pennsylvania and Elm, a couple of those incidences have been from drunk drivers. So I'm not sure how much a speed bump's going to help that. But I think in general, that curve, when there's so many pedestrians there and there's no sidewalk, can certainly be a problem. So that's kind of the target area. So I don't think until Chief makes a decision on what he wants to buy and where he wants to put them, I guess I don't really have a whole lot to bring forward to the board at that point, unless anyone has some thoughts on the general concept or streets that you're aware of that should be considered for this quote unquote pilot. I would certainly entertain that feedback. I know Chief has also talked about Wig Street as one, just because of the speed that cars can sometimes get coming down Wig into the school campus. So that's another consideration. But
I'm sure Congress is on the list. I saw the, right, is Congress on the list? I saw the, "This is your speed, you are awesome" sign on Congress, so they must be watching that.
yes, I think that's certainly been part of it's one of the, that side of the village. I know some of the neighbors over there have
I've
complained
heard from them, yeah.
coming down Congress and Bradley pretty fast at times. So
I think it's fine to wait for Chief to see where he wants to try them out and when.
okay. So
It'll be interesting to see what DPW says as far as plowing goes coming into the winter. I don't know how they'll handle that.
Yeah, I know that's a concern. That's a general concern I've learned about speed bumps in general. I guess one thought is that they could be taken out for the winter, if that's helpful, or they just don't get plowed over. But if snow's pretty deep, I guess sometimes that can be hard. So yeah, I think that's part of the conversation with DPW as well, is how they would want to approach plowing.
Okay.
I think the next item would be Halloween planning. So Chief and I have been talking a lot. We'd started talking, and then while we were talking about Halloween planning, actually a request came in to close Wig Street, requested by a neighbor to close Wig Street for trick-or-treating to block traffic and create more space, which kind of fit with the thought process we were going with, which was to close off some of the smaller side streets to allow for trick-or-treating with distance, essentially, and make the road available to pedestrians for a brief period of time. Probably our thought was probably 5 to 8, close certain streets, and also designate parking areas around the village that are pretty much already parking areas. Mostly this would be an exercise in marketing, making sure we know people come to the village from outside the village, because it is, the density offers great trick-or-treating. And I hear the candy is a notch above as well, as are some of the decorations. So there's a lot going on in the village for Halloween. So the idea would be, and I think in the Dropbox you can see them. What's the actual file called? I think it's Halloween 2020 V2. So I had a little bit more of an aggressive approach, and then Chief cut it down a little bit, which I knew was probably going to happen. You learn that in the fundraising business, right? You aim high, and the number is going to come in lower. So I had a few more streets closed off than he wanted to. So part of this is, closing off certain side streets that have some density and will allow kids to use the street. And, with that, he and I talked about it as probably needing to be a bit of a volunteer effort as well, to help kind of put people at these barricades so that only those who live on the road would access the road. So, obviously we don't want people in the street, and we want them to know where they can park. And we need people to kind of help police it, that aren't police. And so if you look at the map, basically we're talking about all of Wig Street blocked at each end, and then blocked at South and Main, and then Wigan South. We're talking about Larchmont and Tamarack being blocked, and then we're talking about Bradley, Washington, and Congress being blocked. And that would be the extent of the road closures. And then I put little parking symbols around the village where we could be telling people to park: farmers market, the church, village hall, obviously the main street parking next to the laundromat, the school district, I put the golf course. I don't know if they'd be cool with that or not. So I think you get the idea. It's, basically New York State has said trick-or-treating can go on. I have not reviewed, nor did I know about the county guidelines that Ann spoke about. I don't know if those are recommendations or they are how you're forced to operate trick-or-treating this year. I have no idea what they say. I've not looked at them. So that, I don't know if that throws a wrench in this or not. But again, the idea is to, for a window of time, make streets available where people can walk. And, if we really wanted to get more sophisticated, you could even have one side of the street goes in one direction and one goes in the other, just like they do in Walmart, but not that anybody really obeys that. So again, I guess the main takeaways here are getting people to help, and then the board deciding if we think this is acceptable. It won't cause too many issues in terms of traffic flow. And I think as part of it, the streets reopening at 8, the message we would also want to send to our neighbors is essentially turn off your light and close it down at 8, so that we don't defeat the purpose by encouraging trick-or-treating to still be going on after the streets have reopened. So again, I think the key would be, getting the volunteers and making sure this is marketed widely to the village and beyond, so people that are coming here to trick-or-treat would know what's going on.
So a few thoughts, a couple items. I did forward to you and Chief, the county health department. They're basically the modified version of the business flyers. So when you go into a business, it states that, masks required, hand sanitizer available, et cetera. So they're requesting, not requiring, requesting private residences who are going to hand out candy that they post these signs as reminders for people coming up on the front porch or what have you, of sanitation, masks, distancing, etc. They're requesting that treats be individually, bagged, purchased kind of thing, not necessarily the, not that I don't know if people do this much anymore, but, homemade brownies that you've, cut and stuck in a bag with your hands, maybe avoid those this year and opt for the good stuff. Snickers bars, Reese's sticks, if anybody wants to know.
No apples.
Yeah, take home the apples and wash them first, I guess. I know there's a lot of interest from the community. I've had several people reach out to me wondering if the village is going to do anything. I would actually, it just came to me a minute ago, I would actually like to see coordination between the police department and the fire department on this. See if fire can provide, they have fire police, so barring them being on a call, if we can get some of the volunteers to man some of these, man or woman, these barricades, I think that would help. Obviously, if neighbors and folks in the neighborhood want to help, that's great as well. But, we're only going to have a handful of police officers. Your average neighborhood neighbor or volunteer is probably not ever directed traffic. So if a volunteer from the fire company would join in, I think it would be a great, especially if we're going to be marketing this as a village effort, I think it would be a great, I think it would be a great thing from a village perspective if we have both of those departments helping out. Along those lines, whatever the closure is, I think we should make sure it's stated that it's closed to local traffic only. I don't want to run into the complaint of, the neighbor needs to get out to go whatever, they need to leave their house on Wig Street to run and pick someone up from soccer or whatever and come home, which would happen anyway if the streets weren't closed. All we're doing is we're, eliminating the danger of the through traffic. And then I had a couple of people request that if the village does do anything, that we make the hours earlier. So sunset on Halloween is going to be 6 p.m. So it's going to be dark by 6:30. If we go from 5 to 8, I think a lot of folks would like or enjoy being out earlier than 5. So if we could go from 5 to 8 is not bad, but 4 to 7, somewhere in that range. So we have additional daylight hours, especially for little kids trick-or-treating. And then that actually, to your point, Keith, we can encourage it to be shut down earlier. Once it's been dark for an hour or so.
Well, I think one way to look at it is, people could trick or treat earlier. If you want to trick or treat at 4 o'clock, I would imagine it won't be very crowded to the point where street closures might not be necessary to begin with. I guess I'm trying to anticipate and I've never charted this, but what the typical kind of peak flow is going to be. We can market to people that we don't want you trick or treating after 7. I don't know if anyone's going to listen to that. So I guess I'm trying to anticipate what people are going to do anyway. I guess the other side of it is we could expand that window of blocked roads, and as long as we have the volunteers, the people that live in those streets should not be inconvenienced, I wouldn't think, as long as they're being allowed into their house. So, if we go forward.
Yeah, 5 to 8 is not bad, actually, now that I think about it. If sunset's at 6, dark at 6:30, then you've got an hour and a half on either side. That's not bad.
So no, Keith, that we went back and forth a little bit on this plan. I like it quite a bit now that I'm actually seeing the map. That helps me a lot to understand kind of where your head's at. And I think I was concerned. I wanted to make sure that there was enough different spots throughout the village that people kind of self sort into different areas. So there's enough space for people to spread out, even with the road closures. If we only did it on a small area, that's still going to create too much kind of density. But I think this plan seems pretty sensible to me. Yeah, I would just recommend looking at that county health document and kind of working in some other wording on just best practices of I think one of their things is try and have your treats outside of your house so people aren't coming up and using the doorknob and ringing the doorbell and that kind of a situation and crowding at a doorway. If you can set up a table or sit on your stoop and kind of hand things out, I think all those things can help people just kind of be a little more dispersed. So I think the language that the county puts out, good guidance. And if we can work that into the PR that's going on around it, I think that'll make a lot of sense.
And doesn't it also, isn't the county language encourage maybe not even up on your porch? Like if you could be in your front lawn, that's way better.
Right. Yeah. I think our plan certainly would be to have just like a card table out just put a row of candy and everyone grab a candy and keep going kind of a situation, and have masks and say happy Halloween and move on.
COVID's the best thing that ever happened to the kid that abuses the self-serve candy.
Yeah. Well, we'll have like a fly swatter, I think, like that. It's not quite 6 feet, but it's close enough, and you can still kind of.
Yeah, that's true. Somebody can still police it, and then.
But I do, regardless of where we all stand on all the measures, following what's been approved, I think it's good to reinforce that and to be like, Halloween isn't a day off. You
Right.
guys have to observe these measures in school. You're observing these measures in the Tompkins County school districts in New York State. You're observing them here on Halloween, and this can still be fun. But again, right, got to give some guidelines, or I'm just gonna drink the whole bottle myself.
Yeah, I kind of saw this as like the map and then the guidelines all kind of just being one, and like with a nod to thank you, Trumansburg Police and Fire, for your assistance. That kind of all baked into kind of one marketing, one sheet.
And do you want, should I be helping you with an inroad to talking to the fire department, or do you want to do you just do that, Keith? Do we make an email? Hey, it came up. How about that?
Yeah, if you want, you can talk to Matt about it directly and just.
But you've got the master plan, so I think I'll just link you back. It makes the most sense.
Okay. And I think DPW would actually provide the barricades. I don't know how many barricades we have.
We have a ton.
Do we? Okay.
We have enough to block off, I don't know, say a village mile, Jordan, for a couple hours. I think we have something like that. Yeah.
So you're planning on having this ready for public consumption sometime next week, I'm hoping, if we're talking about the following weekend.
Yeah, it's Tuesday night. Yeah, if not before this weekend.
Okay.
As long as we get everybody on board who's going to be volunteers,
Okay.
then I don't want to release anything without the departments all being good with it.
Right.
So as long as everyone signs off on the plan, and then I can circulate what that one sheet looks like to the board for everyone's feedback. Make sure it has all the bases covered. And yeah, so certainly I didn't want to definitely planned on including best practices for regards to the candy distribution, as well as the map and everything else.
I just emailed all of you the official email from the health department with their Halloween guidelines or suggestions.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. I think that's it.
Did you have a body cam update?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So apparently there is an updated, I think we approved the purchase, but now we need to approve a payment document that's in the Dropbox. And then that would allow Joe to contact the company Axion, I think is the name, to actually make the order.
So it's in the Dropbox under item 8E3. This is the actual contract. And so if there's any questions, we can certainly discuss it, but I would entertain a motion to authorize me to sign this contract with Axon on behalf of the Trumansburg Police Department for body cameras paid over a 5-year time frame.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, anything else for Keith? Or Keith, do you have anything else?
No, double check. No.
Treasurer Vicky.
Excuse me. We have 2 documents in the Dropbox that need to be reviewed, and the second one is a resolution to pass regarding the financing for the leaf truck. Guy sent this to Warden and I late last week, so we put it in the Dropbox. It refers to the 3 different ways that we looked at financing the leaf truck. The resolution is the second document that basically says the resolution of the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees authorizing acquisition and purchase of the John Deere leaf truck and trailer by installment payment agreement through a lease finance transaction pursuant to General Municipal Law 109-B.
And we will not read this whole thing because it's way too long. Basically, I'm going to jump in, Vicky. Basically,
Sure.
Municipalities, when they lease an item as opposed to purchasing it outright or bonding for it, the comptroller and general municipal law require the municipal attorney to do a financial analysis that shows that the lease is a better option than the outright purchase or borrowing via bond. It is rarely the case historically that that is true, but with lease rates being near zero, it is occasionally true, as it was with the ladder truck. Our more recent fire truck lease and now the leaf truck lease. So we are doing this after the fact. We already have the leaf truck. It's already put into service, but we need to have council's opinion on record and a resolution accepting council's opinion as the reason why we chose to do the lease, passed and on record. And so if there are questions, go right ahead.
I was gonna move to
Yes.
have that
And
resolution.
I would entertain a motion to adopt the resolution as presented for the authorization of the lease finance of the leaf truck.
So moved.
Second.
Now, any questions, comments, concerns?
Just to point out that board is spelled wrong in the resolution.
Yeah, I saw that.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, Vicky, anything else?
No, we're gonna start getting ready next week for the auditors that come the first week in November. You know, just working on the daily stuff that comes in, that goes on. That's all. Not this time of year, it gets a little slower. So that's about it.
Okay, any questions for Vicky? Tammy or Morgan?
So I've spent I guess the rest of the most of the month, working on FEMA webinars and FEMA grant applications and DASNY and SAM and all those wonderful acronyms that we're all loving so much. So other than that, Morgan and I have been working on the records room upstairs. We hoed out one of the supply cabinets, or I'm sorry, one of the supply rooms that we use and the police department use for the car seat program. So we're going to keep working on that kind of stuff on Mondays when we're there together, when there isn't paperwork that needs to be done. Taxes, I'm getting ready to send them to the county for relevying. Right now, our unpaid amount is $40,003 and some change. In comparison to last year we were at right around 28,000, so it's up just a little. But other than that, I really don't have much to report unless someone has actual or specific questions. Excuse me.
Any questions for Tammy?
Is anybody gonna fess up to put my job on the Facebook?
I referenced that earlier. I don't think anyone picked up on it, but I have no, I don't even have access to the Facebook page. So I wish I thought of it, but I didn't.
Yeah, you and Wegmans both. All right, that's all I got.
All right, well, if there's no questions for Tammy, we'll move on to item number 9, which is old business. There are the first 2 items can actually be truncated into one resolution. There are 4 items in the Dropbox. I'm hoping everyone was able to briefly review them. This is the next step in the LED streetlight replacement. There is a design approval authorization template, which I need approval from the board to sign. This basically allows NYPA, New York Power Authority, to move on to the next step in the design phase. We had what was called a 90% design meeting, which was kind of the draft review. This allows for them to proceed to revise it according to what we discussed and present back the 100% draft. The next item is from NYSEG. Actually, it's a purchase authorization agreement. Because the last quote was from 2018 and they refused to honor it. From the Better Lucky Than Good department, they refused to honor it, and when they came back with a number that was nearly $30,000 lower than what we the 2018 offer was. So we will gladly pay NYSEG less for our own street lights. So there's a purchase authorization agreement, and side by side to that is a street light sales agreement. Don't ask me why we have two documents to buy the same thing. And then there's also a waiver document. NYSEG is waiving a requirement of the village with respect to it's a temporary waiver from the application of NYSEG's electrical distribution construction standards in relation to the installation of certain streetlight circuit disconnect devices. So basically they are, believe it or not, and I had to ask for confirmation because I have a hard time believing these things sometimes, they are actually streamlining this part of the purchase for us. And so I would entertain a motion to authorize me to sign all four of these relevant documents with respect to the ongoing process of purchasing our streetlights from NYSEG and converting to LED.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any comments, questions, or other conversation?
I can't believe we're finally here. This is great. That's it. Sorry, Ben.
No, I second that, actually.
The other good, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ben.
Just a quick question. In the sales agreement, there's a section on easements, which just confused me drastically, and it just reminded me to confirm that Guy has looked at this and read it through and has signed off on it.
So Guy has actually not, NYPA has. I'm certainly fine with sending it to Guy for his blessing.
I mean, NYPA's actually probably better. If their lawyers have reviewed it, they've probably reviewed it 100 times, I would guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I didn't send it to Guy was because most of this is in play in other LED streetlight program buyback communities that NYPA is already involved with. So I don't necessarily, I'm certainly happy to do our due diligence, but I don't necessarily want to duplicate all of the work of others. I'm
a little curious about the generosity they're suddenly offering. This seems very unlike NYSEG. It kind of makes me like the critical thinker in me is like, okay, what's going on here? What's the catch?
Well, at least one thing that's certainly happened is, and I'm trying to find the email. Give me 1 second. At least one thing that's happened is that the Tanya Dougal, who is at the Utility Services Commission for New York State, she's now involved, and basically they're the state commission that requires that timelines be honored by utilities. They are very much in favor of this program. And have set guidelines by which NYSEG must follow. So I think that there is some, and maybe revenue shortfalls by municipalities are part of this. There is certainly some pressure from Albany that was non-existent this time last year. That is very much in play right now. So I don't know if that explains all of it, but it's at least a piece of it. Any other questions or comments? Any desire to have some or all of this pass in front of Guy's eyeballs?
I just reread that section I was a little bit concerned about, and I think it actually makes perfect sense. They're basically just reserving their, they still own the pole. So if they have to change, if they have to reroute the electricity or something, it said essentially we
we grant you all of the, all of the easements, but also we keep all the easements. And I wasn't picking up on the nuance there. So that's my fault. I'd be happy. I mean, I agree with your assessment that LIPA's legal team is probably pretty well versed in this, and their review is adequate for me.
Yeah, and ISAC certainly retains ownership of their poles and any other easement that allows them to do work, to do utility work. Any other comments or questions, concerns? All right, then hearing none, I would call for a vote authorizing me to sign all of these. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Ben, village website update.
Yes. So Jess and I had a call this afternoon. In the interest of time, I don't really want to get into too much. I think most of this is not necessarily something we need motions or movement on at the board level per se, but a couple of comments did come up of just about how we want to move forward. In general, I was very excited to kind of start the process off. I think I got a good feeling from our contractor we're working with, and I appreciate Jess joining as well and having a lot of good input and fresh set of eyes on where we can kind of take the website. I'll just kind of hit on a couple open questions we had, but again, I think we can take the conversation offline. Just some ideas on, do we want to think about our village branding a little bit and possibly kind of tune up our logo or not, was kind of a topic of conversation. They have a different payment provider that they integrate with that might have some benefit if we want to continue to integrate that with forms and allow people to kind of submit forms and payment all in one go on their website. So that's something we could consider down the road, but not something we probably have to make a decision on right away. We kind of talked about doing this in a bit of phases of more like, let's just get over to the new setup and then we can keep iterating on making forms and payments and whatnot easier as we go. Part of the benefit of the plan that we have here is that, we're kind of there. This group is kind of on retainer as it were, and we can kind of keep making additions as we go. There was a bit of a longer conversation actually around the Ask the Mayor piece, just because there's some concerns around having people make users on the new system, and is there privacy concerns, and do we have to deal with data removal requests and so forth. So we actually have some ideas, but I'll kind of just talk with you individually, Roden, around that and where that might lead. So in general, that's to say, really good kickoff call. We should start hearing back on some more details over the next week or so on kind of rough structure of the new website. And then I'll run that by everybody here, and then we'll start talking about getting a couple design ideas out there. The thought is to have about 3 different designs that are rather different from each other, and we can kind of talk about what we like of each of them and kind of bring them together into a final design and then move from there. So well on our way to a improved setup, I believe. Is there anything else you wanted to add around that, Jess?
No, I'm psyched. It's awesome. It's user friendly. It's intuitive. There's some opportunity for a work reduction in the office should it be opted in for at some point, but not required. Good stuff. Thanks, Ben.
Cool. And then I can go right into the HVAC update if we want to from there.
Sure.
I don't know, actually, I think, so Tom has been mostly running this. I think he's mostly been communicating with Roden and myself. Obviously, we all know that the heating in the front office is not where we want it to be. We've had a couple different folks talk about taking a look at it. NP Environmental came in and gave a look around and then gave us a quote for basically doing the work to get us a plan, which is not what I anticipated initially. But that quote was somewhere in the $4,000 to $7,000 to go write up like an actual, real, well thought out engineered plan. While I appreciate that, that seems a bit steep. We have also had a quote from Hubbard for them to come in and build out a plan for $1,000. So I'm kind of thinking of these two as basically quotes to do kind of enough of a study to have an opinion on really where we should go with heating in the front office. So I wanted to have a conversation here. If we feel like we should start kind of moving forward on getting a better handle on this whole project, and that would be spending some money to, kind of figure out what we're in for on adding additional heating or insulation or circulation or whatever, the kind of solution is that comes up. I'm inclined to ask Hubbard to come in and do that work, especially at the $1,000 price. I think it's pricey, but probably worth the investment to understand where we have to move next. The question is, I think I'd like to see if we could move more quickly than doing a permissive referendum, waiting the 30 days. Now we're talking getting into November. I don't know as if there's a good place to take money out that's more easily accessible, at least to cover this immediate piece. So I wanted to have a conversation here about how do we want to move forward? And if we do move forward, I was looking at some of the building lines, if there's something we could pull from maybe the maintenance and repair line, consider something like that to make a play here. So I'll kind of open it up for thoughts and ideas.
I'm just pulling the budget. I think for $1,000, we can certainly we got $2,000 in the building maintenance and repairs contractual. I don't know if that's earmarked already.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. I don't know if Vicky, if you know if there's anything for that.
I'm doing that right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That would be where I would think.
Yeah, that was where I was thinking as well.
No, none of it's been spent as of yet. That's through August, but I don't believe anything's really been spent out of that.
So I would just use that then, Ben.
All right. So then I'll go back to Tom and ask him to get Hubbard to come in and do that $1,000 estimate on, or $1,000 of work to get us a project plan essentially for where we want to go with this.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, good.
Right
Anything
on schedule.
else?
Thank you.
Yes. Anything else for old business? Anything for new business? Then we are ready to pay some bills. We have an abstract in the Dropbox for us to review and approve. First one being the general fund abstract in the amount of $162,127.37.
Move that we pay that abstract.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I see the new fire truck is on there. Or fire pickup, I should say. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, then all in favor of paying this abstract as presented, please say aye.
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 Our next abstract is the water fund abstract totaling $19,676.72.
Move that we pay this abstract.
Second.
Second.
Any comments, questions? If not, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Next up is the sewer fund abstract totaling $18,741.97.
I move that we pay this abstract.
Second.
Comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Next up, capital improvement water well project, which is still alive and kicking, totaling $12,078.49.
This should
This was
be the last bill.
Oh, I've been hearing that for a year.
I know.
This
This
is
is the
complete.
refab of
the-
the wells.
This should have
This
been
is-
Deb's, but I'll move that we pay this abstract.
Second.
This is the completion of the well rehab on well 1, I believe. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 And last but not least is trust and agency totaling $30,378.67.
I
Move
move
that we pay this abstract.
Second. I didn't want to take all of them.
Any comments or questions? Most of this is our health consortium bill. Hearing none, then all in favor.
Sorry, what's it mean?
sorry.
What's it mean if someone's missing sick time hours?
It probably means
Oh,
that
go
they
ahead.
didn't punch in, so we had to write them a manual check.
Okay.
Clock in, clock out errors. Any other questions? If not, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 And the bills are paid. Second public comment period, and I see no one from the public present. I do have need of a very short executive session to discuss potential legal matter.
Move that we enter executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Let me turn off the